Hey, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. It should be yet another great late night conversation. Got a lot to talk about as usual, and we're just going to chat like we always do. Uh, it's going to be good. So, yeah, let's jump right into it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Good times, folks. Always a pleasure to interact with all of you. And we're going to do what we normally do on these streams. I'm going to give my opening remarks, which is whatever it is that I plan to talk about for the evening. Then from there, I will do a roll call and we'll find out who is on the other side of the camera, who's watching, names and locations. That's always a lot of fun. And then from there, I will answer your super chat questions for the remainder of the night. So if you've got a question and you're on Rumble, send a Rumble rant. And if you've got a question and you're on YouTube, send a super chat. I cannot see questions people raise on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook and you got something you want me to talk about, come over to YouTube or come over to Rumble. That's the way I can answer your questions. Yeah, it's going to be a good show. So there you go. Just a couple quick announcements, really just one announcement. Every morning on the CPI YouTube channel, we have a morning message. Today, the morning message was great. It was from Dan Niswander. He gave a great message talking about his memories of Occupy Los Angeles. Before that, Rachel gave a great message. I'm going to schedule a message for tomorrow. It's going to be great. It's a great message from somebody else. So, go and subscribe to the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. You can check in every morning for a morning message, giving an update from different members around the country, an inspiring message. We tell people to start their day with revolutionary hope and optimism. That is the idea. Now, we also have this other option, which is that if you like the morning messages and you want to tell something and share something, if you've got something to share, you can make a morning message. And we are trying to do morning messages every day, so we do need people to step up and make morning messages. So please record a morning message. If there's something you'd like to share with the community, if there's an inspiring story, if you want to read from one of our books, if you want to talk about something that's important to you, whatever you want to do, do it for longer than 1 minute, 1 minute minimum, no maximum limit. We've had people do 20 minutes before, and just give a nice morning message. You can now send it with this link. You just go click on this link and upload your morning message. Boom. Very easy, done. So always appreciated when people make morning messages. And that's something we do with the Center for Political Innovation. So those are the two announcements we've got for tonight. We just had an amazing workshop out in Chicago. We'll have video of that soon. I'll tell you all about that. But so we're going to jump right into the opening remarks for tonight. And so if you have a super chat question, a question you want me to answer in the second half of our show, send a super chat or a Rumble rant. That's the second half of the show is all you guys. It is all me answering your questions. So by all means, send your questions if you want me to talk about something in the second half of the show. So I'm going to jump right into the opening for tonight. So I don't know why this isn't on the front page of every newspaper. But then again, maybe I do know why it's not on the front page of every newspaper. But this came to light today. This is a screenshot from the head of the operations of the Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party is the ruling party in England, Britain, the United Kingdom. In Great Britain, the UK, the Prime Minister is Keir Starmer, and his party is the Labour Party. And the Labour Party, the head of their operation, says, I've got nearly 100 Labour Party staff, current and former, going to the United States in the next few weeks, headed to North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. I have 10 spots available for anyone available to head to the battleground state of North Carolina. We will sort out your housing. Email me on laborforkamala@gmail.com. Now, on the one hand, you might think this isn't a big deal, right? The Labour Party is a liberal imperialist party, and Kamala Harris is a liberal imperialist candidate in the United States. And so what's the big deal? Some Brits are going to come over here and campaign for Kamala. Well, it's a big deal because of all the nonsense we've heard for the past 12 years about foreign meddling in our elections. Right? We were supposed to be outraged that allegedly Russia bought some memes on Facebook. But here we have the largest political party in Britain announcing that they are dispatching staff to the United States, and they've even set up an email account, Labor for Kamala. So if we're concerned about foreign meddling in our elections, why is this not of concern? Well, it's not of concern because Britain is a country we're supposed to like, and Russia is a country we're supposed to hate. And so it's supposed to be totally fine if the British interfere in our elections. But we're supposed to be outraged at the notion that Russia might have any political influence in the United States. The whole thing is completely outrageous. But it goes to show you that there's a double standard. All of the chest beating about Russian meddling and all of that, it was really just that they hate Russia, right? No, I mean, there should be much wider outrage about this if we're concerned about foreign meddling in our elections. But the reality is that the British have been in American politics meddling since the time of the American Revolution. I mean, originally the 13 colonies were British territories. We had a revolution. But after that, there was still a layer of the population that was sympathetic to the British. The American Civil War was fought between the South and the North, and the South, the southern states, were aligned with the British because they were supplying cheap cotton to the British textile industry. The British even thought about sending their military to aid the South in the Civil War, to break the blockade so they could get some of that cheap cotton. And it was the Russians who sent their military to New York City's harbors to make clear that they would move in to support the North if the British moved in to support the South. And so the British didn't get directly involved. And British interests, British finance, British bankers have been a big part of the American political establishment for quite some time. Carol Quigley, who is the academic mentor of Bill Clinton, wrote an entire book called The Anglo-American Establishment. And he talked about Cecil Rhodes, the colonizer of Africa. Cecil Rhodes, his estate, he died. Rhodesia is the name that Zimbabwe used to have before it became an independent country. And Rhodesia, before it had its independence and became Zimbabwe, was a colony set up by Cecil Rhodes, the British colonizer. And Cecil Rhodes, in his estate, he left quite a bit of money for a secret society to be founded to promote the interests of the British Empire. And eventually, we also know that Cecil Rhodes' estate created the Rhodes Scholar Program. And you don't know how many of the elite in the United States are Rhodes Scholars. You look at the Council on Foreign Relations, you look at the presidency, the administrations, the top members of Congress. So many of them are Rhodes Scholars. Well, the Rhodes Scholarship Program is a program, a very elite scholarship program for Americans to study in Britain. And it's very much the British elite looking for people that they can cultivate and groom to be their allies. And that, Britain and the British Empire and the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Carnegies, they very much represent an axis of American politics. People talk about Alfred Milner. People talk about Arthur Balfour. That there is a whole layer of the American political establishment that has been tied into Britain for the longest time. And the round table group of Cecil Rhodes eventually gave birth to the New York Council on Foreign Relations. And now the Council on Foreign Relations is the most important think tank in the United States that basically sets U.S. foreign policy. Their voice is Foreign Affairs magazine. They operate out of New York City, the Council on Foreign Relations. And the Council on Foreign Relations is very much a British entity. And it's, you think about Wall Street banks, you got HSBC Bank. Well, what does HSBC stand for? It's Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. Well, it's not a Chinese bank. It was a British Empire bank set up for when Hong Kong was part of the British Empire. And it was set up to make money off of exploiting China, the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. You think about BP, British Petroleum, one of the biggest oil companies that has a lot of power in the United States. We're talking about a huge amount of power exercised by the British Empire. So the fact that a major political party in Britain is sending people over to the United States to campaign for Kamala Harris, it's not shocking. But if there was genuine concern about foreign meddling in our elections, this would be an outrage. They would at least try to cover it up. They wouldn't put it right in front of our faces. They wouldn't be bragging about it, but they are. They have absolutely no shame, just like Israeli politicians have absolutely no shame taking credit for defeating people in the presidential primaries, right? Israel openly meddles in American politics, and the British Empire, the British imperialist state, openly meddles in American politics. But there's no outrage about this because these are countries, Israel and Britain, that are part of the imperialist world order. They're part of the Western financial system. They're dominated by the big monopolies that dominate the United States. So we're not supposed to care that they would interfere in our politics. It's not of big concern. And of course, many people have pointed out in Britain, when Scotland was going to vote to be independent, when they had an independence referendum in Scotland, Barack Obama went over to Britain and interfered in their politics, urging them not to have Scottish independence. And when the Brexit vote happened and the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, the U.S. politicians and political elite had no problem going over there and meddling in their politics. And this reveals the absolute double standard about all this foreign meddling nonsense. The reality is that every country, to some degree or other, has interests in the United States because the United States is the center of the world empire, the center of the global financial system. And it has the United Nations headquarters in the United States, right? Even North Korea, which is a country that's been completely blocked out of the global economy, they're a UN member state, and so they have an office, a mission in Manhattan. And that, the Islamic Revolution of Iran happened, but there are all kinds of Iranian Americans who fly back and forth from Southern California to Iran who have business interests in the United States and business interests in Iran, and that even countries that are completely locked out of the global economy have interests in the United States. So the idea that, we can't have foreign influence, if the United States is going to have an economy where its corporations are dominating the entire world, those countries are going to have economic interests in the United States as well. And the whole thing is just completely absurd. But when they wanted to demonize Russia, when they wanted to tell you that Russia was a bad country, that Russia was no good, they, of course, played up the idea that Russia may have somehow influenced Donald Trump getting elected, and they made hysteria about it. I mean, it wasn't a scandal, at least not to anybody except Michael Moore, that the Bush family was very, very close to the royal family of Saudi Arabia. That they even, that one of the Saudi royal family members, they nicknamed him Bandar Bush, I believe, because he was so close to the Bush family. And there's many countries that have big interests in the United States. But right now, they are playing games. You'll notice the Uhuru movement was indicted. I was in Florida for their trial, and they were found not guilty of being foreign agents, but convicted on conspiracy because they allegedly were acting in the interests of of Russia in the United States. They made that a crime. Well, is it a crime for these foreign lobbyists to be here campaigning in our elections? Are they going to indict them? Are they going to indict Kamala Harris for getting their help and not, rebuking their help? I mean, of course not. And in addition to that, the American Israeli Political Action Committee. They are constantly involved, endorsing candidates, opposing candidates, and they're blatantly working in the interest of another country called Israel. And there's many examples of this that we see. They have indicted a number of different people. Right now, they've indicted the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, alleging that he was influenced by Turkey because the Turkish government supposedly bought him something or did something, and he says he can disprove it. He says he's innocent, but that's the charge against him. So if we're having this big crackdown on foreign influence in American politics, why is this happening? And why is the head of operations at the British Labour Party bragging about this? And why is there no shame about it? Why is this not on the front page of every news? If we're just so concerned that the mayor of New York City's got to get indicted for allegedly getting money from Turkey or being influenced by Turkey, if the Uhuru movement is facing prison time for allegedly, being too friendly to Russia and trying to influence American politics for Russia, if Sue Mi Terry, the top Korea scholar and advisor to Bush, an advisor to Obama, a longtime CIA individual, if she's been indicted for allegedly lobbying for South Korea because they bought her some handbags or something, then why in the world is this okay? Well, this is okay because it's just expected, because it's the political establishment. The Labor Party is not a socialist party any longer, and it never really was. But at least at one point on paper, it was a socialist party. But in the 1990s, they dropped Clause 4 from their constitution, and they rejected and denounced the call for public ownership of the means of production. And the Labor Party at this point is just a liberal party in the United Kingdom. And they drove out Jeremy Corbyn, who was their kind of Bernie Sanders-like figure. They drove him out because he was too critical of Israel. And they recently expelled him. And they've had a purge in the Labor Party. Anybody who is critical of Israel is basically getting kicked out of the Labor Party. The Labor Party is this liberal party in Britain that does not allow anti-Israel voices at this point. If you are anti-Israel, they kick you out of the Labor Party. And of course, they're meddling in American politics, doing everything they can to make sure that Kamala Harris becomes the next commander-in-chief. Just as the Labor Party is thoroughly pro-Israel, so is the Democrat Party. And actually, today we had Kamala Harris responding to the murder of the leader of Hamas, the Palestinian organization. And there are still people that maintain the reason that we must vote for Kamala Harris is because somehow she is less pro-Israel than Donald Trump, we are told. Donald Trump is so pro-Israel, you have to vote for Kamala Harris, we are told, because of the fact that Kamala Harris is slightly less pro-Israel than Donald Trump or something. Well, this was Kamala Harris's statement in response to the murder of the leader of Hamas. Now, how are you going to have peace talks if you're killing the leader of one side? The leader of the Palestinian organization, Hamas, was murdered today, was killed. And Kamala Harris, did she respond by saying, that's not bringing us closer to peace. That's not bringing us closer to reconciliation. No one's going to negotiate. Well, no, this is how she responded.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief.
Now, right there, right off the bat, now if some Israeli military figure were killed, would she say, oh, and they had the blood of thousands of Palestinians on their hands? Of course not, right? Of course not, right? I mean, she wouldn't say that, right? She would call it a terrorist attack. And if you look at the coldness with which Kamala Harris is delivering this message, right, this is what we will expect from her, right? This is a woman who happily sent people to jail for smoking marijuana, happily covered up drug lab test results. I mean, you watch the coldness with which she, it's basically in the same tone as Hillary Clinton's we saw, he died. It's delivered in a much more mechanical and emotionless way. But there is not an ounce of pro-Palestinian sentiment in what she has to say.
Sinwar was the mastermind of October 7, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. A terrorist attack that killed 1,200 innocent people and included horrific sexual violence and more than 250 hostages taken into Gaza, including 7 Americans, living and deceased, who remain in captivity. A terrorist attack that triggered a devastating war in Gaza, a war that has led to unconscionable...
See, history began on October 7th. It's not like the Palestinians have suffered since 1948 or anything like that, right? It's just this Sinwar guy decided to commit an evil terrorist attack, and that's what started all of this.
Suffering of many innocent Palestinians and greater instability throughout the Middle East. In the past year, American special operations and intelligence personnel have worked closely with their Israeli counterparts to locate and track Sinwar and other Hamas leaders.
Now, the USA is claiming it's trying to create a ceasefire, but now it's admitting that while they're supposedly pressuring Israel to have a ceasefire, they were helping Israel to track down the leader of one side and murder him with a drone. This is pretty blatant. This is not the voice of anyone who wants peace, right? If you are trying to de-escalate the conflict in Gaza and all that, you don't respond this way to the leader of the Hamas organization being killed. This response is just blatantly, she is on Israel's side. Israel gets a free pass. It can do whatever it wants. And the U.S. government, there's troops now in Israel. They're going to help them do it.
And I commend their work. And I will say to any terrorist who kills Americans, threatens the American people, or threatens our troops or our interests, know this, we will always bring you to justice.
What about the USS Liberty and all the American sailors who were murdered by Israel on purpose in 1967? What about Rachel Corrie, the pro-Palestine activist who the Israelis intentionally drove over with a bulldozer and killed her when she was engaged in an act of peaceful protest? Are they being brought to justice? She's saying anyone who kills Americans. Israel has killed Americans. Israel has killed Americans on a number of occasions. There you go.
Israel has a right to defend itself, and the threat Hamas poses to Israel must be eliminated. Today, there is clear progress toward that goal.
How is this speech any different from anything Trump or anything that any hard right Republican has ever said on the question of Israel?
Hamas is decimated and its leadership is eliminated. This moment gives us an opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza.
Right. You murder the head of one side and then they're just supposed to surrender. This is not working toward reconciliation or peace in any conceivable way. And anyone who thinks this woman is going to govern or lead the United States in a way that's going to lead us closer to peace in the Middle East is completely delusional.
And it must end such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. And it is time for the day after to begin without Hamas in power. We will not give up on these goals, and I will always work to create a future of peace, dignity, and security for all.
Yeah, I mean, that was a blatantly one-sided statement on the situation. And yeah, what about Gonzalo Lira, right? Who was murdered, an American who was murdered by the Ukrainians. There's many examples here. But, we shouldn't be surprised. I am proud of how ahead of the game we were on Kamala Harris. I wrote my book about Kamala Harris 4 years ago. And now so much is coming out. She plagiarized one of her books. Whole sections of her book were copied from another book. She just cut and paste other people's work in one of her books. She lied about who her grandmother was, right? Her grandmother was white, but she found a black woman and found a picture of herself being held by a black woman when she was a child and called it her grandmother because she wanted to convince people she was black. And that has come out now that her grandmother is not the person pictured in her autobiography as her grandmother. Kamala Harris is completely a fraud in so many more ways. We just talked about the drug lab scandal. We just talked about her trying to kill an innocent man in the state of California. And we just talked about how lacking in any moral compass she is. But now, it's all coming apart. She is a gigantic fraud, it's blatant. So we're ahead of the game on Kamala Harris, and I'm sitting back and I'm just kind of smiling. Look what we started. Look at what this book that they stupidly drew attention to by banning it from Amazon. Look at what this book started, right? We started something big. When they banned this book, I was on Kim Iverson. I was on Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal, InfoWars. We blew it out of the water. It was a great step forward when we put that book out, and we were ahead of the game. Now, I wanted to say that Donald Trump is generally positioning himself as being more pro-Israel, more anti-Iran. But actually, there's this claim today. He was doing an interview, and I guess I'll show you the clip, and then I'll tell you why this is a much bigger deal than you realize. Okay, so Donald Trump was on a podcast today, and he was being interviewed, and they asked him about regime change in Iran, and this is what he said.
What's going to happen to Iran with you by the end of your administration? I'm not asking.
I would like
tactics,
to see Iran be very successful. The only thing is they can't have a nuclear weapon.
Are you okay with the same administration and way of governing stays, or would you like to see it go back to the 70s when Shah's was running it and Iran was one of the top 3 countries in tourism?
We can't get totally involved in all. We can't run ourselves. Let's face it.
Sure,
Patrick. We can't run ourselves.
You put sanctions, the people are going to turn and flip on them. It's not going to be a...
Yeah. So why is this important? So they asked Donald Trump, about, hey, they asked him a very pointed question about the Shah and, it was so much better than the Shah. And he said, look, we can't get too involved in there. We can't run ourselves. Now, why is that important? Well, because who is interviewing him? This host, this is an Iranian American, a wealthy Iranian American anti-Islamic Republic, conservative, pro-Israel, regime change guy from Southern California who hates the Islamic Republic, a wealthy guy, PBD broadcast. This guy's on YouTube. You've probably seen his interviews and stuff. He's got a big YouTube channel, big following. And, he just hates the Islamic Republic. He hates Iran. But yet Donald Trump has no shame saying to him, look, I don't, and he's saying to him, oh, it was so much better when the Shah was there. It had all this tour. And he's just like, no, I'm not going to play that game. That's big because the Shah supporters, the hard Iranian right, the Iranian monarchists, the Shahs of Sunset Park, those folks are very influential in Republican circles. But yet Donald Trump said, no, I'm not interested in overthrowing the Islamic Republic. We can't get involved in that. And he even said he hopes Iran is successful. Did you heard that part too? He said they can't have a nuclear weapon, but he says, I hope Iran is successful. That's big, right? We're supposed to want Iran to be as poor as possible. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that Donald Trump, who viciously murdered Qasem Soleimani, who was an awful president to Iran, ripped up the Iran nuclear deal. I'm not going to pretend he's some kind of pro-Iranian guy. But that answer is very, very telling. It just says right there that Donald Trump is just not excited about the idea of regime change in Iran. While there are a lot of very rich people in Southern California who are very excited about such a thing, Donald Trump is not one of those people. And he would probably get points with those people when he was talking to that guy if he would say that. But he just, no, we can't get involved in there. That's a big deal. Look, Donald Trump might win, and Donald Trump might be an awful president, right? And his first term was pretty awful. But I'm hopeful because of the fact that the people who made his first term very awful have turned against him. One of the people who made his first term very, very awful was a guy by the name of John Bolton. And John Bolton, it's now been revealed, was the main guy pushing Donald Trump to do military interventions in Venezuela. And John Bolton has quit the Trump administration and is now campaigning for Kamala Harris. And she's even making advertisements with the Trump, Kamala Harris campaign. Kamala Harris campaign ads are featuring John Bolton. Mike Pompeo was also a bad influence on Trump, and he denounced Trump. He supported the FBI raids on Mar-a-Lago. So I'm hoping that Trump realizes that these regime change folks that were in his cabinet and in his administration, they've all turned against him. And I'm inspired by the fact that Donald Trump continues to brag about working for peace on the Korean Peninsula. He continues to brag about that. He doesn't need to brag about that. There's no reason he should brag about it. And he's been attacked for bragging about it. But he continues to consider this moment that we've made on our CPI banner. He considers this one of the greatest moments of his presidency. That really gives me inspiration. And that is why at CPI, we have been using that as an opening, right? We want to make America great again. And we say only peace can make America great again. Most of Trump's supporters, the overwhelming majority of the people that are voting for Donald Trump, don't want the wars to continue. And Donald Trump panders very hard to that sentiment. And while the American establishment is all out for supporting Israel, all out for opposing Russia and Ukraine and opposing China, Donald Trump is appealing to the gut-level desire to end these wars that is deeply embedded within the bulk of the American people. And that is a good thing. And that needs to be boosted. That needs to be boosted, and we are doing our best to boost it. Now, we are going to be out in the streets with our banner once again, not just once again, multiple times again before the elections. I'm trying to figure out when the next time we're going out is. It's not an easy thing. It takes a couple people to get out there. It's not a one-person job. You got to get those PVC pipes and you got to get those zip ties, and it's quite an operation, but it needs to be done. So yeah, we are trying to boost the anti-war side of Trumpism. That is what we are trying to do. Now, I wanted to continue for the rest of my opening remarks tonight to tell you about an interesting meeting that I was at today. So this was today. That's me. And I'm there with my good friend, Reverend Milhan Stevens, the pastor of Manhattan Family Church. And I'm sitting there with representatives of Kodan, which is a Japanese religious organization, Kodan, as well as a representative of the Korean Evangelical Association, which is a group of evangelical Christians of Korean heritage. And we sat down at the New Yorker Hotel, which is a historic building in New York City, the New Yorker Hotel. You can read about all of its history and all that. We sat down at the New Yorker Hotel to discuss the campaign around this image, right? And we talked about building a movement for peaceful reunification. And it was a great meeting, and we heard different perspectives. One of the speakers was from Albania. One of the speakers was Japanese. One of the speakers was Korean. And we talked about how we can promote this message of supporting peace with North Korea, how we can support this message and what we can do. And it was a short meeting. But it was very productive. And I'm really glad that I was there at the New Yorker Hotel to have this meeting. I'm going to be writing a short news article for the CPI website about this meeting because it's really important that it took place. They had a meeting with me out in the Los Angeles. I spoke before Los Angeles Family Church about peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And now we had this event at the New Yorker Hotel, and I'm really glad we had the event. I think it was a good use of my time, and it was a good afternoon. Reverend Milhan is a good friend of mine, and it was good to meet the other speakers, the representatives of Kodan, the representatives of the Korean Evangelical Association. It was great to meet them, and it was great to talk with them. I gave everyone at the meeting a copy of this book, that we published, Journey of Hope, Building a Movement for Peaceful Reunification of the Korean Peninsula in America. I talked about, the World Youth Festival and what we did there, and how, I was able to speak with the Russian president at the World Youth Festival. And I showed them pictures of us hitting the streets with the banner. And I got a commitment from at least one of the people that was speaking there. He and his associates will help us get this banner out and hit the streets with this banner. So it looks like we may have some support from members of the Kodan organization that have agreed to help us wave this banner on the streets of New York City. So that gives me hope. And I'm hoping that, especially with Donald Trump expected to win the upcoming election, once Trump wins, we need to really boost this and make clear that his victory was a mandate for continuing efforts for peace on the Korean Peninsula. I think that this is an opening because right now, North Korea is very, very close to Russia. They have a special relationship with Russia. And South Korea is occupied by U.S. troops. And South Korea is being pushed to escalate against North Korea because of its close relationship with Russia. And I think that if we can get this message out there, we can play a role in opening the door not just to peace on the Korean Peninsula, but peace in the entire world. And I really do think this is a great opportunity. I think this is a really, really great opportunity. So on that note, you all know I was at the workshop in Chicago this weekend, right? We had a great workshop. Shout out to Gabby and Ellie, and shout out to Denver, and shout out to Penny, and shout out to Ellen, and oh my goodness, and John, and everybody. I mean, we had a great workshop. Shout out to Phil, shout out to Rachel, shout out to everybody. We had a great, amazing workshop this weekend. But as a result of that, I was not in New York City. Now, I often will attend the weekly church services on Sunday mornings of Manhattan Family Church. But I wasn't there because I was in Chicago for our workshop, which is great, by the way. And we have one video of it so far, which is John McCarthy talking about why we need to write letters for Uhuru. But Peter is about to post the video of his workshop that he led on fandom. And then there's a couple of the presentations I gave were video recorded that'll come out soon. And we're trying to get video of different aspects of that event online as soon as we can, because it was a really important workshop. And we're building for a very large anti-imperialist convention in Chicago next summer. And this was a step in that direction. And I'm really excited about what we're doing and what we're accomplishing. It's really, really important. But that said, I wasn't in Manhattan this week. And so I spoke with my friend, Reverend Milhan Stevens. And he said I had to watch his sermon that he gave, because he gave a whole sermon about peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And I thought that was interesting. So I thought for the remainder of my opening remarks, I would show and react to Reverend Milhan Stevens' sermon from this week. Not the whole thing, but just a short, about a 25-minute clip from it that he gave. And keep in mind, he is definitely not a communist. He is definitely not a supporter of the Juche ideology or an adherent of the North Korean ideology by any means. He's a conservative. He is a Christian pastor. He was born in South Korea, but he's a U.S. citizen, spent his life here in the United States. He's got Japanese heritage. His father is a white American. His mother is Japanese. But he very strongly believes in peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And so he spoke before this very conservative church to make the case for peace with North Korea. So I wanted to show that here, just so people could see. Keep in mind, now I'm not putting this out there like this is the view that we have. I'm putting this out there to show you how this pastor at a very conservative church made the case to his congregation for working for peace on the Korean Peninsula. So, I'm going to show this for a little while. But the other thing is, I see we have 2 super chats, both from John McCarthy, and I look forward to answering them in the second half of the show. But please send questions for the second half of the show, because the night is young and I've got plenty more to say. So by all means, send some super chats. But we're going to put on Reverend Milhan's sermon about peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. So here we go.
Point is, America might look divided. Our world might look divided. But if we believe that God's will bring us all back together, then it is going to be the biggest love fest you've ever seen. The biggest love fest. All the terrible things we did to each other becomes flip side, is the greatest reunion ever. And I promise you, we'll never be as divided as we are now, ever again. And this is the heart of Korea. This is the plan for a heavenly unified Korea. I mean, this war, the Korean War, is one of the most horrific wars, because it's with a people that they're really brothers and sisters. Even you'll find that the Korean people are the most homogeneous country. These people they're literally family. And I remember I saw a picture, as I can't erase it from my mind. And forgive me if this is a little bit PG-13, but it was a picture of a South Korean soldier holding the decapitated head of a North Korean soldier. And he had this big smile on his face. It is like the most unthinkable situation that happened on this country. And it wasn't caused by themselves. It was caused by outside influences.
Now, what he's saying there is very, very true. The top Korean history scholar in the United States is Dr. Bruce Cummings. And Dr. Bruce Cummings, he composed and wrote a lot of a film that was made for BBC television about the Korean War called The Unknown War. And they wouldn't show it on American TV because they said American audiences couldn't handle it. The amount of atrocities that went on in the Korean War, every single building above 1 story tall in North Korea was bombed. And it got to the point during the Korean War that they would send out the Air Force, to go and bomb North Korea. And they would come back with the bombs still attached to their plane. And they would say, there's nothing left for us to bomb. And I mean, they bombed everything. And when you go to North Korea, for those who've had the opportunity, one thing that they show you is the site of the very horrendous atrocities that were committed against the Korean people in that war. There was a place where there were a bunch of children that were hiding from the U.S. military, and they were hiding in a basement. And so the U.S. Marines, they took a canister of gasoline, and they just poured gasoline down into the basement and, lit it on fire and burned the children alive. And they still have the site of that, where all these children that were hiding in a basement were burned alive after the U.S. troops poured gasoline down into the basement. And there's many, many really horrendous things that were done during that war. Torture was routine. The South Korean forces, when they captured people, they tortured them. And during the Vietnam War, I believe the South Korean military was sent to Vietnam to fight against the communists. And they were the ones that did the torturing because it was technically illegal for the American troops to torture people. When they wanted to torture a Vietnamese person, they handed them over to the South Koreans, and they're the ones that tortured them. And there's many, many horrendous atrocities. We know nothing about the Korean War in the United States because of the Vietnam War, because it went on so long. And because there was a big anti-war movement, we know about the Vietnam War, but we really know nothing about the Korean War. The Korean War is almost like a blank spot in our memory, but it's not forgotten on the Korean Peninsula, especially not in North Korea. They remember it every day, and they're locked and loaded in case they ever get invaded and attacked again. They've even got nuclear weapons, so keep that in mind. I would recommend Bruce Cummings' work if you really want to learn about the Korean War. I would recommend Dr. Bruce Cummings, his book, North Korea, Another Country, his book, Korea's Place in the Sun. You'll learn a lot, but we'll continue.
So how horrific and how responsible we should feel for this conflict. So I want to read some words from our true parents about how we resolve this conflict and what we can do about it. How does that sound? And as it turns out, it's stuff that we're already doing, so we'll just keep doing more of it. Oh, let me first start with Ephesians. And again, I want to remind people, what is peace? And you will hear about this in the Peace Starts With Me seminar. But the conclusion is that it's harmony, that unity, that coming back together under God's vision, that is peace. And I love how the Bible explains this well. In Ephesians 2:14, for he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. So you couldn't be more clear. Peace is when we become one. Even Chonoguk. What is the definition of Chonoguk? Like, what is the literal translation of Chonoguk? To become one. That is the most fundamental blueprint of peace. The definition of peace is we're to become one under God's will. Not Satan's or your own, but God's. Okay, that is the definition of peace. And again, in Hebrews 12:14, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. So it's not just becoming one based on how smart you are and making some strategic, you can appeal to the different groups of people and have a nice event. No, it has to be centered on the higher authority, on God's dream, God's divine principle. From Mother Moon, here she emphasizes this point that unity can only come with God's intervention. The unification of North and South Korea has not been left in the hands of politicians alone. It has to become a matter in which God can intervene. Reverend Moon is working hard day and night to have his worldwide foundation help achieve the unification of North and South Korea in accordance with the will of God and construct the ideal world of peace, free from immorality and corruption. Immortality. You like that? Who likes this? Mother just puts it well. And she talks about Reverend Moon. Do you think he stopped working hard after he passed in spirit world? No way. I think this word is more true today than even then. I think Father's working that much harder from heaven and moving all the pieces together. And it's a very hopeful time. And you'll start to see that more. But it has to come from God. I would go so far to say that God is preventing Korea from uniting until the people of Korea can accept their Savior. Right, Reverend Edner? I heard you. Yeah. Yeah. So we think, if we talk to the right politicians and we do this and that, then we can unite the Korean Peninsula, we'll make some governance system that accommodates the two ideologies. That ain't going to do anything. If that's all it took, we would have had peace by now. I believe God has a stint preventing Korea from uniting until the true owner of Korea will be recognized and be lifted up. And then all that wonderful, smart people will come in and figure things out after that. But it has to start in the right place. It has to be started on God's will. The people are too spiritual to just let some smart people figure things out. It has to be spiritual. So I know this service is getting maybe a little bit longer, but I do have some story time. There's a great book called As a Peace-Loving Global Citizen. Anyone heard of it? And there's some great content in here. So I'm going to read a short chapter, half of it. And it describes True Father's meeting with Kim Il-sung. And there's some real gems in here I'd like to highlight. So I think it's best for me just to read it. Today, many people talk about peaceful unification. I, however, spoke about this at a time when people did not dare even use the phrase peaceful reunification. I got to say, True Father definitely came up with some words that didn't get trendy until later. Well, even interracial marriage. That was not a popular thing when we were doing it, right? I mean, was it popular for any of you? No. Also, tribes. This was a term that Father's been using a lot. And now it's a typical marketing term. People use, who's your tribe? Where do you find your tribe? So, yet again, reunification, that was not popular before. I, however, spoke about at this time when people did not dare even use the phrase peaceful reunification for fear of being charged with violating the anti-communist law and the national security law. Today, when people ask me what must be done to bring unification, I tell them what I have always said on this matter. If South Koreans love North Korea more than they love the South, and North Koreans love South Korea more than they love the North, we could unify the peninsula today. I was able to risk my life to go to North Korea in 1991 and meet President Kim because I had a foundation of love within me. I made arrangements then with him regarding meetings of separated families, North-South economic cooperation, development of Mount Kungang, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and working toward a North-South Summit conference. No one thought an anti-communist could go to a communist country and open the floodgate of unification, but I surprised the world. I like to say we specialize in making miracles. That's what we do. Before my meeting with President Kim, I delivered a 2-hour address titled Blood is Thicker Than Water at the Mansudae Assembly Hall, seat of the Supreme People's Assembly, North Korea's legislature. I spoke that day to the leadership of North Korea about a way to unify North and South through love. I stood before the leadership of North Korea who were armed with Kim Il-sung's philosophy and told them exactly what I believed. Who knows kind of how this goes? Yeah, this man is either got big balls or just no brains. North and South must be unified, I said, but guns and swords will not make us one. North-South unification will not happen with military force. Even the Korean War failed in this respect, and it is foolish for anyone to think they can make another attempt through military force. Neither will unification happen with the Juche ideology that you espouse. What will do it then? The world does not operate only by the power of human beings. Because God exists, nothing can be done by human effort alone. Even in situations of evil, such as war, God carries out his providence. That is why North and South cannot be unified through the Juche ideology that puts man at the center.
Now, what I think is important about this part that he's reading, I see there's some hubbub in the chat. What I think is fascinating is that, this guy, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, he didn't just go to North Korea and say this stuff. He said it in a speech before the Korean National Assembly. Like, this would be like the equivalent of like a foreign leader coming to the United States and giving a speech to a joint session of Congress. So he gets up in front of the official Congress, the National Assembly of North Korea, and says some pretty outrageous stuff, that I'm not sure, I'll just tell you I don't agree with. But they let him say it because North Korea is committed to peace. And this longtime anti-communist activist pastor from South Korea was there talking about peace, and he got up in front of the National Assembly of North Korea and said some wild things, and they let him say it. So there we go.
Bringing about a unified homeland can be done only with Godism, I continued. God is protecting us, and our time of unification is coming. Unification is the destiny. It is the task that must be accomplished in our era. If we cannot accomplish the sacred task of unifying the homeland in our time, we will not be able to hold our heads high in the presence of our ancestors or descendants for the rest of eternity. You see that? See, Father knew. God's will is unification, but not without God. What is Godism? It is the practice of God's perfect love. Neither the right wing nor the left wing can unify North and South. It will be possible only when there is a head wing thought that is able to harmonize these two. To travel the path of love, you must apologize before the world for your invasion of the South. He gets really hard here.
Again, they let him say this. They let him stand in front of their parliament and say some crazy things.
This is tough stuff, he says. I understand that North Korea has planted 20,000 resident espionage agents in the South. This is crazy. You are not going to believe what he told them to do. Send an order immediately to all of them, instructing them to turn themselves in to the South Korean authorities. Even I'm like, wow, really? If you do that, I will give them, he said, I will give them an education that will rectify their ideology, basically fix your broken ideology, rectify their ideology and turn them into patriots who will contribute to the peaceful unification of North and South. I don't know why they didn't just shoot him right there.
Yeah, and because the North Koreans let this anti-communist pastor get up in front of them and say, say all of this stuff. And I think that's pretty wild. But it shows, Reverend Moon had spent his life working against North Korea, the leader of an anti-communist religious group. But then after the fall of the Soviet Union, he said, look, I need to offer reconciliation. And he went there. And he got up in front of their parliament, in front of their National Assembly. From there, he gave this anti-communist speech, and they let him do it because they are open to dialogue about peaceful reunification.
In North Korea, they're like, are you kidding me? If they don't do something, they're in trouble, right? I pounded on the table in front of me as I spoke. The expressions of Mr. Yoon Ki-bok and Vice Premier Kim Dal-hyun grew tense. No kidding. I was aware of what dangers I might be exposed to for making such statements, but I needed to say what I had come to say. I was not simply trying to shock the audience. It may come across that way. I knew that my speech would be reported immediately, word for word, to President Kim and his son, Chairman Kim Jong-il. So I wanted to state my purpose clearly. When I finished, some of the North Koreans present even protested, demanding to know how I could dare to speak in such a manner. I looked at my entourage and saw that their faces were white. I know, well, we know some of them, right, who they were. No, and Mother was there too, right? I don't know how pale she was. She probably, she knew what was up. I looked at my entourage and saw that their faces were white. Our members who were with me told me the speech had a very strong tone, and the atmosphere of the audience was not good. I was adamant, however. Why did I come here, I asked them. I didn't come to see the land of North Korea. If I were to leave here without saying what needed to be said, here it comes, heaven would punish me. I've had these experiences before where I fear God more than the so-called powerful authorities that, in front of me. I fear God more. Even if today's speech is used by them as an excuse to deny me a meeting with President Kim and to expel us from the country, I still needed to say what I came to say. On July 8, 1994, President Kim suddenly died. His death came when North and South relations were at an all-time low. Patriot missiles had been deployed on South Korean soil, and hawks in the United States advocated the destruction of nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. It appeared that war might break out at any time. North Korea announced it would not receive any mourners from outside the country. But I felt it was important we send someone. Again, unification, attendance, at the risk of Dr. Bo Hee-pak's life in this case. I wanted to fulfill my obligation as I had formed a brotherly relationship with President Kim. I called Bo Hee-pak. Go immediately to North Korea as my representative to mourn President Kim's death, I said. No one can get into North Korea right now, he said. I know it's difficult, but somehow you have to go. I don't care if you have to swim across the Yalu River. Get in there and convey my condolences. Let's give a hand to Dr. Bo Hee-pak. I mean, this guy. He had to deliver more than one very, inconvenient, unpopular points of view. Bo Hee-pak first traveled to Beijing and risked his life to communicate with North Korea. Then Chairman Kim Jong-il gave the instruction, an exception will be made for a mourning representative from Chairman Moon. Escort him to Pyongyang. Let's give a hand to Kim Jong-un. This is Kim Jong-il, right? Kim Jong-il. After condolences had been expressed, Chairman Kim Jong-il met with Bo Hee-pak and politely greeted him, saying, my father always said that Chairman Moon was working hard for the unification of our homeland. I'm glad you came. There's no one that they trusted more. In fact, North Korea is not the problem, folks. North Korea, they're ready to welcome us in, to do a blessing, do whatever we want to do there. It's the South. No judgment, just, I know we have to go through the proper channels, but.
Did you hear that, folks? North Korea is not the problem. It's the South. Boom. Boom. That is something you will never hear any American college professor admit. That is something you'll never hear on American TV. You just heard it from a pastor of a conservative church in the United States.
North Korea is ready. In 1994, the Korean Peninsula was in such a crisis that it could have exploded at any time. In that moment, we were able to resolve the nuclear crisis on the Korean Peninsula because of the relationship I had formed with President Kim Il-sung. Sending a representative to express my condolences was not a simple matter of mourning. See, of course, the media won't cover this. They won't give true parents credit. Neither will the South. But we know what happened. In fact, for many times after this, we were the go-to to resolve issues. I described my meeting with President Kim in considerable detail to illustrate my point about the importance of faith and loyalty between two people. I met him for the sake of the peaceful unification of our homeland. I was able to convey my concerns for the destiny of our people with faith and loyalty. As a result, after his death, his son, Chairman Kim Jong-il, accepted our mourning representative. There is no wall that cannot be scaled, and no dream that cannot be realized when we share our love with a sincere heart. You know, if I want to go to battle, to a front line somewhere, I'm looking at sincerity. I'm looking at real love for Jesus, real love for God. That's the most powerful weapon. When I went to North Korea, I thought of it as my homeland and the home of my brother. I didn't go there with a desire to get something from them. I went with the purpose to share with them my heart of love. The power of love touched not only President Kim Il-sung, but also his son, Chairman Kim Jong-il. Since then, continuing to this day, we have maintained a special relationship with North Korea. Each time North-South relations became difficult, this is a fact, we have played a role in opening the gateway. It is all based on the fact that I met with President Kim Il-sung, conveyed to him my sincere heart, and built a relationship of trust with him. That is the importance of trust. Following, and here's a list of some of the things we've built over there. Following my meeting with President Kim, we now operate the Pyeonghwa Motors plant, the Potanggang Hotel, and the World Peace Center in North Korea. Well, North Korea, yeah, somewhere in North Korea. There are billboards for Pyeonghwa Motors around Pyongyang. When the South Korean president visited North Korea, North Korean officials took him to the Pyeonghwa Motors plant. South Korean business leaders who accompanied the president stayed at the Potanggang Hotel. You can't do that. You can't bring South Koreans into North Korea, you know that? But we can. We do it. Non-North Korean members of our church who work in North Korea, gather at the World Peace Center each Sunday for worship service. They have worship services in North Korea. Okay. All of these projects are efforts for the sake of peaceful exchanges and unification of North and South. They're not being done to make a profit. They are efforts to contribute to the unification of North and South as an expression of love for the Korean people. Let's give true parents a big, big hand for this. Okay, bedtime story's over. Gonna wake up now. So this is, like Jesus showed us what true love was. He broke through the ceiling of what is true love. And now we have true parents to show us this is true love. Not just forgiving your enemy, but you love your enemy. You do business with your enemy, and you match your children to your enemy. I love Dr. Young's talk about this, right? He talked about his wife, she's Japanese, he's Korean, and he goes further and further, like, making love with the enemy. It's like, this is true parents. This is the true parents' legacy that we can never forget. And we inherit this. I want to highlight this point here in terms of how we can support reunification. Basically doing our responsibility. He said, which I read just now, I believe that when a person sweats, he or she should sweat every last drop that he or she has in him or her. He should sweat even the last little bit that is in his heart. I think this is our responsibility. Do we know exactly what we're supposed to do? No. But if you do anything at all, check, we can measure your sweat. And that is our measure of success. Because that sweat moves heaven. And this one here, I wanted to highlight, this is being United States citizen. I feel responsible for this aspect too. Patriot missiles have been deployed in South Korean soil, and the war hawks in the United States advocated the destruction of nuclear facilities. So in other words, there are people who, they don't like peace. They don't like to make negotiations and love unconditionally. They just say, just blow the place up. Forget denuclearization, just blow up the nukes. Who cares about all this waste of time? And that will never work. That will just breed more hatred, and it'll just create more issues. We've seen that happen time and time again. War never helps, unless it's God's war, but true parents never said any war today should happen. And again, God's dream is unification. That's why we continue to attend. Even when there's no way that we can see, unification has to be the goal. I'm going to put some images up here. I don't know how you feel about these images, but I think it points to a very hopeful future with our relationship with Korea and a peace treaty centered on our true mother, only begotten daughter, and the mother of Korea. And that is the fact that we've met with Kim Jong-un. Our president of the United States, look at these flags back here. You have the American flag and the North Korean flag. So we're honoring, we're respecting the Korean culture, okay? And I took all these pictures from CNN, by the way, so in case you're wondering how, this is not biased. I'm playing both sides here, okay? So shaking hands. And look at the affection in Kim Jong-un's eyes. Look at him. He's like yeah, he's like a child, And I don't know, maybe True Father's working somewhere in all of this, don't you think? Father has to be somewhere in this picture. You can maybe see his spirit right there. He's just like, I don't know, he's floating around somewhere in there. And they're walking together here, and they put on a whole Singapore summit just to have more dialogue, more respect, more dialogue. And then Trump's got his look, right? And you've got something signed here. As we know, it didn't really go very far, unfortunately. But to me, and these are people that we're working closely with. And I don't give them as much credit as true parents. We educated them. We helped them. And they were willing to respond. So again, I want to give another big hand to true parents for guiding our U.S. representatives to put more emphasis on the Korean Peninsula. And, President Trump's speech is on our website that he gave at the Rally of Hope in Think Tank 2022. And there is some politics in there, so forgive me there, but he is pretty politicized. But I think his presence was very important as a sitting president.
So there you go. I shared that with you all because I wanted you all to see that there are other people out there who have similar goals to us, that would like to see peace with North Korea, that would like to see the United States join the new economy that is emerging around the world, that believe in economic growth. And I wanted you all to see that. And I think it's good. And a lot of people in the chat understood why I showed that, right? We need to be finding friends anywhere we can find them, because it's so much more important than all of us. And it's so much more important than internet fandom and just being on the internet and being so pure. And I'm the greatest communist that ever existed. I'm so pure in all of my communism. I'm tired of that. I'm way past that. First of all, I'm an innovationist, right? I'm not even using the communist label anymore. But second of all, that it's about getting stuff done in the real world. It's about building a real anti-imperialist movement. And in order to do that, we've got to actually come together, and we've got to actually get things done. And we have done a lot in CPI. And we continue to do it. And we're going to be out there with our banner about peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And we have supported the Uhuru movement. And we have supported the Houthis and the people of Yemen. And we have stood in solidarity with the Islamic Republic of Iran. You know, and we have gone to Russia, and we have attended world youth gatherings. We are the cutting edge of anti-imperialism in the United States. And that's because we're not held down by team sports. Oh, you're on the red team. Oh, you're on the blue team. Oh, you can't talk to anyone on the purple team. We don't do that. We don't do that. There's a job that needs to be done. Our country is falling apart, and our government is marching us toward World War III. And it is urgent. It is absolutely urgent that we build a real network of people that can get real work done toward anti-imperialism in America. We need a government of action that fights for working families. I don't care what you call it, but that's what we need. And I'm more concerned about what we actually need than any label. So one thing I did want to mention now, you know, second half of the show, I always answer people's questions. We've only got 2 super chats that have come in so far. I believe there's a Rumble. There's a couple Rumble. There's 2 Rumble rants also. But if anyone has any more super chats, you know, the second half of the show is really all about super chats. But I've started experimenting. I'll just throw this out there. I've started experimenting. So I want to do shorter videos, right? I'm all about doing long videos, right? We know that I have really long videos, and Sundays, usually every Sunday on this channel, I do a really long video. It's like 5 or 6 hours compilation of our stuff. It premieres all day. I like to do that. It's just kind of a Sunday tradition. And I do these streams where I get on here and interact with you all. I do them almost every night. But I'm starting to experiment with short videos. Now, so far, the experiment is not going very well. I did 2 short videos I released today, and they didn't get very many views. And, you know, I mean, but I'm going to keep going, right? I'm not going to give up. That's not how I am. I don't just give up. But instead of making long videos where I talk about things for a long time, I'm making these very short videos, just a couple minutes, that are highly edited with a lot of graphics and a lot of images of what I'm talking about. That is a new style I'm experimenting with on this YouTube channel. And so I made 2 videos, and I've got a couple more in the next few days that'll be coming out, and I'll be making more of them, of very short videos with lots of graphics in them, lots of images, lots of editing, right? So I'm going to show you the 2 short videos I made today, or that were released today, and I'll show them on here. Those videos are great. Well, thank you, Huey. They're not getting a lot of views. I'll just tell you, not many people have watched them, you know? So maybe it's because they're expecting long form content on this channel, but regardless, you know, I'm going to show, the first video that I made, was about Jill Stein, right? And, you know, there's this whole hubbub that Jill Stein was endorsed by David Duke, the white supremacist David Duke, the former Klansman, former member of the U.S. Congress. David Duke endorsed Jill Stein. So I made this quick video about it, and I did a lot of editing, and, you know, it's only 5 minutes. It's a 5-minute video, but I did a huge amount of editing and chopping together and finding images and finding footage. So this is my short video that I made on the Jill Stein, David Duke controversy.
Talk about an issue I've been seeing on social media lately. They're making a big deal in the Democrat camp about the fact that David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, former member of the U.S. House of Representatives, that he endorsed Jill Stein. Now, the whole thing is stupid because Jill Stein is of Jewish heritage. She's a good person. She's an anti-racist. Obviously, she can't control the fact that David Duke put out a statement on the internet supporting her. So the whole thing is just dumb. And the fact that anyone is using this against Jill Stein, you know, anyone can endorse anybody. That doesn't make them responsible. I think Jill Stein is playing a very, very good role at this time. I was just with Jill Stein in front of the federal courthouse in Florida to support the Uhuru movement. And on top of that, she is leading the Muslim American community away from the Democrat Party because of the fact that the Democrats are blindly supporting Israel and its bombing of Gaza. The Council of American Islamic Relations has endorsed Jill Stein. I think Kamala Harris is a dangerous warmonger, and the idea that Muslim Americans won't vote for her but would instead vote for Jill Stein is a great thing. David Duke is somebody who made a name for himself, kind of reviving the Ku Klux Klan in the late 70s.
What is your title?
Grand Wizard or National Director.
You are Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
He's such a nice-looking boy. You know what I mean. I don't mean to be flip about what
I know.
People are surprised, huh?
I guess so, because Hollywood's got this image that anybody who believes in their own race, if they're white, they've got to somehow be old, they got to have a big beer belly.
He's very open about the fact that his father was an intelligence officer, was involved in Air America, leafleting, propaganda, dropping propaganda leaflets into Southeast Asia for the CIA. And David Duke is a staunch anti-communist. Every anti-Semitic screed that David Duke has written begins with repeating the same old lies against communism and then saying that communism is something we should blame on the Jews. What I want to point out about David Duke is that he's very easy to control. David Duke is a gambling addict, and David Duke is a bit of a narcissist. He's had a number of plastic surgeries on his face. It seems to me like somebody called him up and said, "Hey, David, want to get your name back in the headlines again? Want people to be talking about you again? Well, endorse Jill Stein. That'll confuse them all." And he's got to be cynical. If he was at all serious about opposing Israel and their crimes against the Palestinians, he wouldn't let himself be used this way. David Duke has to know what's going on, and he has to know that he's being used, and he must not care. I saw this very same tactic be used against Charles Barron when he was running for Congress. The day before the election, David Duke endorsed him, and the mainstream media made a big deal about the fact that this black candidate for the U.S. Congress, a revolutionary anti-imperialist, was being endorsed by David Duke. As if you really want to talk about David Duke, look into the fact that he's not just David Duke, he's Dr. David Duke, and that he has a PhD. But where did he get it? Well, David Duke got his PhD in Ukraine. That's right, the same forces that are burning World War II memorials and saying that the Nazis were right in fighting the Soviet Union in Ukraine during World War II and outlawing the Russian language. Those are the same forces that gave David Duke a PhD. That should tell you all you need to know about who controls David Duke and why they might be using him to smear a candidate who wants to negotiate with Russia. I'm not concerned about Jill Stein and any alleged ties to David Duke. I'm sure she has nothing to do with him. I'm more concerned about the fact that Jill Stein has a lot of staffers working for her campaign that are tied in with a Trotskyite group called Socialist Alternative. I generally think Jill Stein is playing a very, very good role, but I have noticed that Jill Stein has said some things I don't agree with about Syria and about Russia. And many people have pointed out that's probably due to the fact that her campaign is heavily staffed by Socialist Alternative, a group of counter-revolutionary Trotskyites who were tied into U.S. color revolutions, who worked against the Soviet Union and worked against legitimate communist governments around the world, the same thing Trotskyites always do. So give Jill Stein some respect. The idea that David Duke is endorsing her is a completely manufactured, made for social media hubbub, bunch of malarkey. It's not a serious political scandal.
Yeah. So that was my 5-minute response to the Jill Stein, David Duke controversy. And I see people saying that, yeah, you're right. Social media is rigged. I mean, who cares if these are getting views? These videos are effective. So then I made another one about Nicaragua, right? This was just a quick video I did about Nicaragua.
Just talk to you all about a recent event. Nicaragua is a country in Central America, and it is a Christian government. In their Constitution's preamble, it acknowledges the role of Christian faith in their founding. The leader of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, not only did he cut ties with Israel, but he gave a very impassioned speech.
Es increíble cómo al frente del gobierno de Israel se encuentra un primer ministro que es hijo del demonio. ¿Por qué? Porque lleva en la práctica una política de terror y es Hitler, ¿sí? El primer ministro de Israel es Hitler, allí instalado, llamando a destruir a los pueblos, al igual que el que preside Ucrania es otro nazi, otro hijo de Hitler, queriendo comprometer a la OTAN para irse a la guerra contra la Federación Rusa. Lo que están haciendo los gobernantes norteamericanos, utilizando a Israel, armando a Israel, lo que están haciendo los gobernantes norteamericanos junto con gobernantes europeos, porque ahí están los imperios se han unido creyendo que de esa manera van a poder derrotar a los pueblos y no se dan cuenta que al final de cuentas o llevan al planeta a una guerra total o sencillamente no les queda más que esperar la derrota.
Not only is it a Christian country, but it's also a socialist country. In fact, the slogan that Daniel Ortega and his wife, Rosario Murillo, who's now vice president, have used is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. They have overseen the full electrification of the country. Even the most remote and rural areas of Nicaragua have been electrified. They've wiped out illiteracy in the country and enabled the people of Nicaragua to have the ability to read with universal schooling and education. They've launched land redistribution so that the people of Nicaragua can have access to the land, and it's not all owned by wealthy landowners who go back to the time of Spanish colonialism. In addition to that, they have a micro-entrepreneurship program. That's right, a socialist government is going out of its way to help people start their own businesses. And the micro-entrepreneurship program of Nicaragua is one of their most successful programs, where the socialist government loans people money to start their own businesses. And many Nicaraguans have been very, very successful and seen their living standard go up. They see Israel as an outpost of a global financial system, a system that is leading wars all over the world and grinding countries into poverty. And they view their revolution in Nicaragua, based on principles of Christianity and socialism and solidarity, as a fight against that system. So they stand with the Palestinians because they see the Palestinians as also fighting against that system. I think by looking into Nicaragua and what its Christian and socialist government has achieved in terms of industrializing, raising people out of poverty, and now standing with the Palestinians, can really enlighten people about thinking beyond the left and right paradigm of American politics and getting to real solutions.
Yeah, so those are the two shorts that I've debuted. I have two more that I've made. They'll be coming out in the next couple days, and I'm going to keep making them. Because, I think it'll catch on. Maybe at first, maybe I need to do them a little bit differently or promote them differently or whatever. And I noticed they did pretty well on Twitter. So I'm just going to keep doing these little shorts, and I'll get better at doing them as I do them. I do plenty of long form content. I take clips from these streams and I spread them out, and but we're just going to keep experimenting, right? We do a lot of different stuff on this channel. We come at things from a lot of different angles, and so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, right? It's all an experiment. You just have to work every possible angle you can, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, if anyone, I see there's one more super chat that has come in. That's very good, and I will make a point of answering that from Perpetuous Augustus. If anyone has any more super chats or Rumble rants, that's great, because that gives me something to talk about for the second half of our show. But on that note, let's do the roll call. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us? Bendigo, David Fox, Jenny in Cincinnati, St. David's, Bermuda, Conrad in Poland, Luca in Singapore, Rachel in Wyndham, Georgia, Ian Chester in England, Jacob in Wisconsin, Patch in Arizona, Nico in Los Angeles, Courtney in Virginia, Auckland, New Zealand, Rice from Adelaide, Australia, Master Jack in South Africa, Alex from Brazil, Ryan in Kansas City, Connor in Colorado, Kay in New Orleans, Mexico, Saviero, Seasoned Noob in China, Ali in England, Gabby in Chicago, Mr. Wonderful in Generation Z, Steve in Boston, Dan in the Los Angeles area. Great morning message this morning. Very, very good stuff. JDL in Missouri, St. Louis, Timoshenko. Great to see you at the workshop, Tim. Have a good vacation coming up. I know you're headed out of the country. Congrats. Huxley in England, Philadelphia, Random Element in Philadelphia, Tijuana, Mexico, Mundo Cat, Morgan in Philadelphia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Morgan in Philadelphia. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Daha from Seattle. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. And names and locations. Mr. Wonderful from Quanos. Welcome, Mr. Wonderful. Very, very good. Very, very, very good. Good to have you with us. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Balthazar in Oakland. Very good. All right. So now I am going to, Jason in Niagara Falls. And slowly I turned, step by step, inch by inch. We got the South, Kingfish. All right. Now, if anyone has any more super chats or Rumble rants, now would be the time to send them. I am going to put on some music, as I often do. This is a song I've played on here before. It is this Canadian communist group. It is their song that they wrote called Here's the Rose, Now Dance. Dan got the reference, the Niagara Falls reference. But this Canadian communist group that does this kind of wacky music, they did a song kind of telling their history, how they emerged, how their CPCML, the Communist Party of Canada Marxist-Leninist, was created. And the name of their song, Here's the Rose, Now Dance, comes from Karl Marx's pamphlet, the pamphlet he wrote, 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. But I'm going to put the song on. It's kind of a wacky, hardline communist song, telling the history of how this Canadian Communist Party came into existence. And this, what I particularly like is the lyrics are on the screen. It talks about they raised their yellow banner called Mao Zedong Thought, and we loudly shouted that we had been caught. But ever loyal to Marxism, we stood our ground, and the third plenum of our party brought Mao Zedong Thought down. Right? And it talks about smashing the opportunists and exposing their schemes. I like this kind of music in a nerdy, I'm kind of laughing at myself in kind of a nerd kind of way. So we're going to put on Here's the Rose, Now Dance, performed by the eloquently named, if you were going to start a band, you're going to come up with a name, what would you call it? Well, they decided to call theirs the Canadian Cultural Workers Association. That's what they called their band. Eloquent, just absolutely eloquent. Classically communist. Here's the Rose, Now Dance, performed by the Canadian Cultural Workers Association.
Come listen, young comrades, our history will tell of the glorious struggle to build CPCML. Oh, it is the story of how our class continues to fight battle after battle to smash the old and build the new. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the Rose, Now Dance. In the early 60s, against increasing exploitation, the people rose up to change the situation. Despite revisionist betrayal of this massive upsurge, a new quality in small quantity from the movement emerged. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the Rose, Now Dance. They said don't turn off the people by making a scene, or you'll isolate the left from the mainstream. But we boldly shouted, down with imperialism, down with the lackeys, down with revisionism. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance. There were still lots of questions, but we never shied, for we had Marxism, Leninism, an invincible guide. The trend of unity of Marxist-Leninists irresistibly spread, and defending Marxism, we marched ahead. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance. They all did their best to upset our plans. Failing of comrades who dared to fight back. Then we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance. Driven into a frenzy, the state and agent provocateurs into our ranks, thinking to stop us for sure. But their hope for easy victory was just a pipe dream, as we smashed the opportunists and exposed their schemes. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance. The so-called Marxist-Leninist demand a dogma that's pure, but all they could show us was a gross caricature. Safeguard our independence, the opportunists did say, but the working class censored back, make the rich pay. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance. They unfurled their yellow banner called Mao Zedong thought, and gleefully shouted that we had been caught. Whenever loyal to Marxism we stood our ground, the third emblem of our party brought Mao Zedong thought down. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance. The road has been long, but learn from our class. The proletarian revolution is a practical task. Here is our banner, and here is our task. Defend the Marxist-Leninist party as the vanguard of the class. And we won another battle, see the enemy fall. But don't it seem paltry, and don't it seem small? Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose now dance.
Yes, that is a lot of lyrics. I like this music in kind of an ironic way. You know, you know, they really cram all these like intense ideological concepts in there. You know, and it's adorable, and I love it in my own way. I don't know what it is, but you know, I was talking today, you know, at the event I was at the New Yorker. There was a woman from Albania. And, you know, Albania is where you had Enver Hoxha, the leader of socialist Albania. For some reason, the communist groups that took leadership from Albania, you know, it was originally all the communist groups were aligned with the Soviet Union, except, you know, then the Trotskyites broke with the Soviet Union. And then China cut ties with the Soviet Union in 1961. And so you had some groups that were taking direction from China and some groups that were taking direction from the Soviet Union. Albania was aligned with China. But then Albania cut ties with China. in 1978. And when Albania was all by itself in the 80s, basically, in the 80s and early 90s, there were certain communist groups that aligned with Albania. And those groups were particularly weird. I don't know what it was, but they had the most amazing music. I just got to tell you. Cornelius Cardew, the British experimental composer, he was in one of those groups, originally aligned with China, and then they supported Albania. And the Canadian Cultural Workers Association. I don't know what it is about those groups. They had the wildest music. And that was, you just heard, they raised their yellow banner called Mao Zedong Thought. And we loudly shouted that we had been caught, but ever loyal to Marxism, we stood our ground. The third plenum of our party brought Mao Zedong Thought down. So there you go. I don't know. I enjoy it with a tongue in my cheek. I think that there's a lot of truth in all of that, but it's also, we are in different times and I don't know. I enjoy all of that. That's part of my development and my heritage. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the communist movement. The fact that when I was a teenager, I was taught to sell newspapers. I went out. I eventually traveled the world and had great opportunities. And I am proud of all that I did to build an anti-imperialist movement. And I continue. My views really haven't changed. My goals haven't changed. I want peace in this world. I want socialism. I want a government of action that fights for working families. But I'm not woke. I'm not part of the woke thing. I'm just not. The woke thing, it just doesn't interest me. The negativity, the hostility, and helping U.S. imperialism, I'm not interested in that. And I want to build. I want to construct. I want to be optimistic. So I feel like I've gotten healthier and I've gotten more rational in how I understand things. I have a more clear view of things, but at the same time, my overall perspective hasn't changed. It's just clarified. And I've seen why it is that the Western Marxist movement has done so badly. And so with CPI, we are innovating and we have a new direction that we're going in, but it's very exciting. And we are the expression of this new economy that is emerging in the world. Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran and Nicaragua and Cuba and Vietnam. I mean, this is the future. The Western colonial system is dying. And rather than fight this new economy, we should join it. And we should have a government here in this country that fights for working families and has a win-win relationship with countries around the world. That's what I am focused on. So on that note, folks, I'm going to start answering people's questions. So we always do Rumble rants first, and we have two of them. The first is from Hempcar out in Wisconsin. He says, former chief at NASA Langley, Dennis Bushnell, says, we'll be human contaminated machines, and the natural evolution of everything is over. Is Russia or China doing transhumanism experiments? First of all, NASA Langley, right? NASA is, from what I understand, NASA is it's the space program. Langley is the CIA. So you're saying there's something called NASA Langley. Now, maybe I'm ignorant of that, but aren't those two separate entities? NASA is the space program based in Houston. Langley is the CIA, one of the American intelligence agencies. Now, I'm going to Google NASA Langley in case I'm missing something. Oh, it is something. NASA Langley. Oh, the Langley Research Center of NASA. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. So I apologize. I just didn't. That's a blank spot in my knowledge. I was not aware of NASA Langley. Now I know. Okay. So forgive me. That was embarrassing. Okay. So you're telling me that this NASA Langley guy, he says, we'll be human contaminated machines and the natural evolution of everything is over. Yeah, Langley is a neighborhood. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not into transhumanism, right? I certainly can understand why people are a little bit afraid of it, but I don't obsess over it either. I don't sit around going, oh my God, we're going to merge our bodies with machines and that's going to be the end. And will we still have souls and all that? I don't go down that rabbit hole. I don't. Look, if somebody they lose their leg in a car accident and they get a robot leg and they can control it with their mind, I'm not opposed to that. I mean, human beings, we've always interacted with machines, to some degree. I mean, that's kind of what it means to be human, is that we have the ability to force the environment to serve us, to use technology, to rise to a higher plane. So I'm not sitting around obsessing with the transhumanist threat, but I can understand there are questions, right? That plays out in a lot of science fiction and all that. I'm not ready to jump on that. And I one thing is that we should not oppose AI, right? I mean, artificial intelligence is a very powerful tool. And if we didn't have an irrational capitalist economy, AI would be a great thing, just like self-driving cars. And we should not oppose technological progress. We should not oppose technology. We should oppose, the results of technology in the hands of an irrational profit system, right? But we are not opposed to technological advancement. We believe in historical progress. So the next one is from Violent Fembot. And Violent Fembot says, most politicians are artful, charming bullshitters. But the lightest pressure and most basic policy questions flip Kamala out. Extremely dangerous. She can't fake charm, which even demented Biden excels at. That is a very good point. I have told you, Kamala Harris is unstable. She's a damaged person, and they know how to push her buttons. And that's basically the point I made in this book. She views herself as a victim. She hates her father, and she has absolutely no qualms about harming other people. When she was prosecutor in California, she did horrendous things. And that's why she shouldn't be president. And that's why they want her as president. They know that she's an unstable person that they can manipulate. And I mean, that's all there is to it. And that's why she is dangerous. And that's why I think Trump would be better. Trump has an ego, and that ego will force Trump to try to be remembered as a good guy. Now, Uhuru has extended the deadline for character letters until October 30th. They are close to the goal, but need a few more. handsoffahuru.org/letters. Very good. I have written my letters, but others should as well. And John gave a great presentation urging people to write letters, at our workshop that we did in Chicago this weekend. I have written 3 letters, one for each defendant. I would urge you to go ahead and do that as well. We need more letters supporting the Uhuru defendants. They should not get a day in jail, right? They should not serve any jail time. It shouldn't happen. And so I would really urge people to write a letter to say that these people are not a threat to the community, and they have a certain guideline. They don't want you to comment on their guilt or innocence or to make a political speech. They want you to just attest to their character, that Uhuru is an upstanding group that does great work in the community. They shouldn't serve any prison time because they weren't even convicted on the main charge. So, that's what I would urge you to do. I would urge you to go and write a letter. It's very important. We've done a lot of work around the Uhuru case, and we haven't given up. And I wrote my letters, but we need more people to write letters around the case. There's a great video by John urging people to write letters. So there we go. There we go. Now, this was an interesting one. RFK Jr. has called on the Biden administration to make Israel release the Gray Zone reporter. So you saw this Gray Zone reporter has been arrested. He's a U.S. citizen. He's been arrested in Israel, and they're claiming that his reporting for Gray Zone is, supporting Iran or something. He could be killed. He could get the death sentence. I mean, it's like they've arrested him. But I've seen that a number of people, including members of Congress and others, have spoken up on his behalf. And RFK Jr., who is a big supporter of Israel, has also spoken up on his behalf. And I think that's great. I think we should absolutely support freeing this Gray Zone reporter, and that anything to continue raising awareness about it. Israel shouldn't be able to, free Jeremy. Was it Jeremy Lafredo? Is that his name? Jeremy Lafredo. Free Jeremy Lafredo. We should absolutely raise that from the heavens. Free Jeremy Lafredo. Absolutely. Free Jeremy Lafredo. Free Jeremy Lafredo. And the fact that RFK and Tulsi are taking center stage in Trump's campaign right now is really important. It's really, really important. Tulsi Gabbard and RFK are taking center stage. And yes, they're both big supporters of Israel, but they're both very anti-war and have a record of saying anti-war things. And the fact that they are taking center stage, that's a really good sign. And I mean, I don't know how this election is going to go, but it looks good for Trump. And I suspect that Trump will win because the American people, we've had too much of this. We've had way too much of what we've been dealing with during the past 4 years. It's gone too far. We can't take much more of this. It's got to stop. It has got to stop. So there we go. All right. Now, I've only got one more super chat that has come in. So if anyone has anything else they want me to talk about, now would be the time because, you know, hey, it's not even 11 yet. It's 10 minutes till 11. So I've got a lot more time. I am, you know, yawning and all that. But, you know, if anyone has anything else they want me to talk about, you know, now is the time. You know, you're watching this live, so use your power wisely. Send me a question. Send me something you want me to talk about. If not, I'll have to show another video or play more music or something like that. So by all means, ask me another question. Here we go. How can we reclaim the true legacy of America as a republic founded on resisting imperialism? Deep state calls people enemies of the republic democracy when it is they who are enemies. Well, the thing is, the first thing we need to do is we need to fight for that position among anti-imperialists. Because if anti-imperialism is ever going to develop into a mass movement in this country, it cannot be premised on the idea that this is an evil country, this is an evil society, all the people here are a bunch of Euro settlers who benefit from imperialism. As long as anti-imperialists talk that way, there is absolutely no hope, right? And the attack on the American Revolution that has gone on, right? The 1619 Project of the New York Times and all of that. I am convinced that is a psychological operation. They do not want there to be mass anti-imperialist sentiments. There is a whole history. Go and read W.E.B. Du Bois in his book, Black Reconstruction. There's a whole history of explaining how slavery was an abominable criminal practice that was supported by the British Empire, and it was bad for the majority of white workers, and that the defeat of slavery was a victory for all working people of America. There's a whole lot of scholarship that says that. But the narrative that is now being promoted is that somehow slavery was good for white people. Right? It was good for poor white people in the South that made poverty wages because they were competing with people who worked for free as slaves. Slavery was somehow good for them, and they should just be ashamed of themselves. And the whole purpose of the American Revolution was just for slavery. That is a very common narrative, and it might feel cathartic, and you might feel like, yeah, but it doesn't really have an answer, right? W.E.B. Du Bois and the Black Panthers supported 1776. You are absolutely right about that. They did. And the Communist Party, Herbert Apotheker wrote his Histories of the American Revolution, which Carl the Trinket Man has really pointed me toward as great books on the history of the American Revolution. Herbert Apotheker, a Communist Party member. And the idea that we should just denounce the entire history of the United States as an evil racist thing, that is a way to, number one, put those of us who do believe in anti-imperialist ideas to just make sure that we're on the outs. We're on the outside. We never build up a mass base. And then it then enables us to be used to impose austerity, right? Because if the problem is that people have it too good, right, then of course we'll be useful in helping the ruling class impoverish, right? If that's the issue, right? If American workers are beneficiaries of imperialism who have it too good, well, then we should try to make them poorer, right? To make the world more fair. And this is a really toxic narrative. It really, really is a toxic narrative, and you have to oppose this kind of thing. And it benefits the ultra rich, right? there are all kinds of messages out there that seem radical on the surface. They seem very, very radical on the surface, but are very, very, it's not just that they're ineffective, they're diversions. Here's a great example. 5-10 years ago, I don't hear it so much anymore, but maybe I just don't listen to the far left like I used to. But 5-10 years ago, all of a sudden, in all the leftist circles, prison abolitionism became a trendy word, right? We want to abolish prisons. Now, I remember, Angela Davis, the former communist who sold out the Communist Party, basically, and helped establish the committees of correspondence, denounced the Soviet Union, and helped, destroy and, weaken the Communist Party. In the 90s, after she cut ties with all the communist governments, after she, was working against the communist parties, that, she came out and she was giving all these seminars about prison abolitionism. And I remember reading, and it was kind of obscure back then. It was only Angela Davis who talked about it. When I was first looking for communists in America, Angela Davis, that's a name that comes up. She was like the communist in the 70s. So I looked up, and I remember I read some of Angela Davis's books and listened to some of her lectures when I was like a teenager about prison abolitionism. And I listened to them, and they were very long and drawn out. And she would say a lot of true things about poverty, about inequality, about how, people of color are arrested and imprisoned more often. She would talk about how, there are private prisons and companies that are contracted by prisons that make money from incarceration. That's totally true. And she would talk about, a lot of things that were true. And then she would then say, we need to eventually move toward the kind of society where prisons are not necessary. Now, I agree with that. But why would you call it prison abolitionism? If you walk up to an average person and say, hey, I want to abolish prisons, and they then say, oh, okay, so what about all the child molesters and axe murderers and, thieves, and what about all those evil people? We're just going to let them out? No, we got to have prisons for those people. I mean, unless we're just going to abolish prisons by shooting them all, we got to have prisons. It is, on the surface, it sounds bonkers. And if you really listen to it, all it's saying is we eventually want to have communism, right? We want to have the higher stage of communism, a world with so much wealth and abundance that the need for an oppressive state goes away, right? So why don't you just say communism at that point? Right? Why would you say prison abolitionism? Right? You're just saying eventually we want to get to the kind of society where we don't need prisons. Okay, well, that communists have always said that. Christians have always said that, right? They want to build God's kingdom on earth, right? You heard Reverend Milhan on there talking about Chan Il-guk. I mean, that doesn't sound crazy. We'd like to eventually progress and build a peaceful, prosperous society where there's no need, where we don't have rapists and axe murderers and child molesters, and we don't have a need for prisons. That makes perfect sense. So why would you call it prison abolitionism? Well, you would call it that because you're playing an intellectual game. If you walk up to most people and say, would you like to sign a petition to abolish prisons? They'll say, you crazy, and they walk away. So you're not going to build a mass movement. It's for intellectual head games, right? It's for people that are wanting to be entertained. Hey, darling, would you like to go see an interesting lecture tonight? Why, yes, I would. This guy says we could abolish prisons. Well, that's a wild proposal. Abolish prisons? Let's go and listen to what he has to say, and we'll go sit through a 2.5-hour long, drawn-out presentation that eventually leads to maybe we should build the kind of society where prisons aren't necessary. Why is she talking that way? Right? I mean, it's a waste of time. Right? Instead of this long, drawn-out wankery of abolish prisons, which sounds nuts on the surface, and what they're really saying is just move toward a world where we don't need prisons. if that's the case, why are you going out of your way to say something that sounds nuts? Because you're not speaking to a mass audience. You're not speaking to a mass audience. You're speaking to intellectuals. You're playing intellectual head games. The phrase has shock value. It's stupid, right? And you assume the majority of people are never going to listen to anything you have to say, and you're only ever going to speak to people that are like taken in by the shock value. So, and this is a scarcity mindset, right? Angela Davis is assuming, hey, the overwhelming majority of people are never going to listen to what I have to say. So I am going to say communism in the most weird shock value, I'm going to abolish prison. This is a loser scarcity mindset. We should aim higher than that. We should aim to win elections. We should aim to have millions of people supporting us. And if you go around saying, I want to abolish prisons, you're not going to win. And there's many, many examples of this where it's like so much of leftism. Another one, open borders, right? Abolish borders. How does that one work? Even communist countries have borders. And even if we let every person into the country, we would still have a border. There'd be a checkpoint that they had to, we'd have to show paperwork or show ID or something. I mean, even if we didn't block anybody, we'd still track who went in and who went out. So abolish borders. I'm for a world without borders. Okay, 500 years from now, maybe, but no, abolish the police. Again, that's another one, right? And if you really talk to the abolish the police people, they don't mean abolish the police. They're like, well, we would eventually like to build community associations that rule on behalf of the people and enforce law in defense of the working class. It's like, oh, so you don't want to abolish the police. You just want to get rid of the capitalist state and you want to create a socialist state. Why don't you say that? Why do you make it, oh, we're going to abolish the police? And most working people hear that and they think, you crazy, right? And it's like all of this wankery to sound very, very radical, to sound so radical. Oh, we're going to abolish prisons. We're going to get rid of borders. But it's just a way to avoid saying we need a government of action to fight for working families. A government of action that fights for working families sounds completely reasonable. Why don't you say that? Oh, because it doesn't sound crazy. That doesn't sound crazy at all. What if we had a government of action that fought for working families? That doesn't sound crazy at all. Why can't we just say that? Well, that's not crazy. That's not nuts. That doesn't make me feel all radical inside. It's like peeing on yourself. You pee on yourself first. It feels really warm and nice before then you realize you got pee all over yourself and then it's gross. I mean, that's the equivalent of what these people are doing. They're peeing on themselves. And that's all they're doing is they're just peeing on themselves. And it's like they're trying so hard to not say, and it's just, how can we not say what needs to be said? And that on top of that, there's a lot of money. And this is the problem. Angela Davis, her abolish prisons thing came from academia, right? Angela Davis became a college professor. She was a philosophy professor. If she says, hey, I want to write my thesis about why we need socialism, eventually leading to communism, creating a world with so much wealth and abundance that the need for prisons go away. They're like, nah, we don't want that. That just sounds like communist propaganda. But if she walks in and says, I'm Angela Davis, and I am going to write my proposal about why we should abolish prisons. If she says that, they're like, whoa, give her some grant money. Abolish prisons. That's edgy. Ooh, write her a check from the Rockefeller thing. You get rewarded for sounding crazy. And you get ignored if you sound healthy. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the way the left is set up. And that's why I'm not a leftist anymore. Leftism is I am a socialist. I am an innovationist. I am an advocate of peace. I'm an anti-imperialist. But it's like leftism, especially the woke stuff, it is just insanity. It's just stupid insanity. It's like financially incentivized idiocy. I don't know what it is, right? You know, I have spent my whole adult life trying to explain to people that communism does not mean that everyone gets paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work. That what we want is a rationally organized economy where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. We don't want profits in command. We want society to control the economy so that growth is no longer limited. Spent my whole life trying to tell that to people. I was told my whole life communism is when everyone gets paid the same wage no matter how hard they work, and it's stupid because that wouldn't work. There's no incentive, duh. And so I go out of my way to learn what communism really is, to explain to people what we really advocate. And then some 24-year-old shows up with pink hair and a nose ring and goes, I want everyone to get paid the same wage no matter how hard they work. In fact, they shouldn't have to work at all. We should just get paid for doing nothing. Yeah. And I say, well, that's actually not what it is. And to most people, that sounds crazy. Well, that's because you're a Nazi. And it's like these people are just, I don't know what you want to call. What are they? I don't know what they are. They are not serious about politics, and they're toxic and destructive. Okay. And I mean, it is really annoying. And they get incentivized to be more toxic, to be more destructive. The more cuckoo they sound, the more they get boosted and the more money they get. The more they say abolish prisons, abolish the police, open borders now, the more they talk that way, the more money that gets thrown at them, and the more they get blown up on social media, and the more that you say things that sound completely reasonable, like we need a government of action to fight for working families, the more they smear you and they isolate you and they call you an evil cult and they call you agents of a foreign government and they call you, I mean, that just can't be tolerated. And I mean, it is very, very, very frustrating to experience this. So I you know, the American Revolution thing, right? It is not in our interest to go around saying, oh, the American Revolution was evil. And communists never said that. Right? Go read Lenin's letter to the American workers. In We Are City Builders, we have Lenin's letter to the American workers, where he says the American Revolution was a great anti-colonial revolution. Right? I mean, there's no reason that we have to burn bridges with everything and make enemies out of everything the American people hold sacred. There's no reason for that. There's absolutely no reason for us to do that. But there's a whole bunch of foundation money if you'll do that. And it is really, really frustrating to watch. And that there's this whole language that has been developed that has absolutely nothing to do with what I believe, has absolutely nothing to do with what communist governments are doing around the world, has absolutely nothing to do with what I believe in or what I want to be associated with. I don't want to be associated with abolished prisons. I mean, eventually I'd like to get to a stateless, classless world where prisons are not necessary. But I do not want to be marching around with a banner that says abolish prisons, because that sounds nuts. I don't want to be associated with open borders. I don't want to be associated with abolish the police. I want to be associated with we need a government of action to fight for working families. That's what I would like to be associated with. And, you know, and that's why they hate me, because I am serious. I'm not a monkey. All right. That's what I mean. A monkey, a puppet. That's what a lot of these people are. They're just useful rodeo clowns that they use, right? And they send them out there to create drama and to be useful in playing their political chess game. I actually want to defeat imperialism. I actually want a new world for working families. So there we go. How bad was the B-2 attack on Ansar Allah? Let me just put it this way. The people of Yemen are ready to fight. And they have been ready for this since you wouldn't believe. I wrote my book on the Houthis, which now you can get, the PDF of it, but it's on Amazon, and there's an audio book on this channel. My book on the Houthis, which is like one of the best pieces I ever wrote. I'm really proud of the Houthi book. We'll put it on the screen here. My book on the Houthis, I talk about how they have been prepared. They were told that there would come a time when only they would stand up for Israel or stand up and oppose Israel and fight for the Palestinians when no one else would. They are ready to have this fight, right? If the USA moves its troops into Yemen, those folks have been living up in those mountains for over 1,000 years. They're ready to fight. They are ready to fight. They are locked and loaded. You're not going to be able to defeat these guys with missiles that you shoot, from far away. They are going to fight until the end. I'm just telling you, there's whole regions in Yemen. I mean, it's like northern Yemen where the population is concentrated. There are so many people crammed into one little area, and it's very mountainous, and these are very, very poor people where, Shia Islam, their particular interpretation of Shia Islam is the center of their life. And they are ready to fight and die. They are ready to fight and die. Let me put it that way. So yeah. Okay. So I see we got some more Rumble rants. So I'll do Rumble rants for a little bit here, and then I'll get back to, but if you want to get my Houthi book, you can learn all about the Houthis and their movement. I've done a huge amount of research on it, and no one knows anything about it. Go and read my book. So there you go. And you can listen to the audio book for free on this YouTube channel. So there you go. All right. So, all right, we're going to do Rumble rants because there's a few of those that have come in. So, Hempcar says, Hempcar says, the former prime minister said these global elites have plans to kill millions from the Perdana conference. Well, they're openly talking about depopulation. They think there's too many people in the world. This is the Malthusian ideology, that the economic problems of capitalism are not caused by capitalism. They're caused by there just being too many people, right? There's just too many people in the world. And so to have social stability, we need to eliminate the useless eaters, right? The bulk of the population are useless eaters who need to be exterminated. That is the belief of most of the rich in the world. I mean, not most of the rich, but most of the ultra rich. The British Empire has felt that way. The World Economic Forum, Bill Gates very openly feels that way. There we go. What did Team Blue versus Team Red become the sole framework for U.S. politics? Has it been like this for decades, or just noticed it with COVID? Well, Peter Coffin, he gave a great presentation at our workshop about fandom. And really, it's since the late 70s and 80s, fandom in particular has overtaken not just politics, but sports, religion, exercise, health. Fandom as a marketing phenomenon is brain rot, and it has taken over a number of different fields. And people, yes, at this point, people don't seriously think about politics. Politics has always been a team sport, so to speak. You have political parties, you have campaigns, but there used to be much more coherent ideology, and it has really gotten to the point that politics has deteriorated into fandom, and fandom is commodified identity, right? It's one thing, the Star Wars movies came out. Okay, people watched the Star Wars movies, but then this notion develops, and Peter is much better at explaining this than I am, that being a Star Wars fan is not just a way to entertain yourself. Star Wars is your identity. You are a Star Wars fan. And so you continue to buy things in order to show that you're a true fan. And you argue with other people about how true of a fan they are. And you do things that you don't feel like doing necessarily, because you need to prove to yourself and to other people that you are a good Star Wars fan. This is another stage, right? So you're no longer just consuming Star Wars for entertainment. You are consuming the identity of being a Star Wars fan. And fandom as a phenomenon is particularly toxic, and it has overtaken many different fields. People used to go to church because of religion. Now, religion has become very commodified, right? It was always like that to some degree, but now it's become very commodified. Movies, right? Harry Potter, Star Wars, whatever, sports, right? Sports, people, had their favorite team that they cheered for, but this idea that you are buying an identity, right? That consumption is part of your identity. You're not consuming something because you want to enjoy it. You're consuming it because you want to take on this identity. That is a very big part of modern discourse. And it has really made politics awful because people can't think rationally. You cannot have rational conversations with fans. You can't. You cannot have rational conversations with fans, right? I'll tell you this, right? I have been attacked many times by social media personalities, and they're very clearly in the wrong, very clearly. And, just basic historical facts prove them wrong, or the way they've treated me is blatantly unprovoked, vicious attacks. But their fans just have to keep believing that I'm the bad guy, because that's the way they lose their fandom, right? And then I've had the other side of it. I've had people that get really into me and become part of this community. And then I do something where I disagree with them on an issue or whatever, and then they become an anti-fan, and then they turn against me because, and it's like, none of this is how politics is supposed to work. None of this is how politics is supposed to work. Politics is supposed to be about what's true, what policies are correct, what is actually, it's not supposed to be about any of this, right? And, none of these people are interested in what's true, right? I mean, there's so many examples I could go over. I mean, my experience being here on YouTube, it has been such a roller coaster, but, great example. This guy, Unholy Rome, out of the blue, he attacks me for saying that Karl Marx supported Abraham Lincoln. That's a fact. That's a historical fact. Karl Marx wrote for the New York Tribune and wrote glowing articles about Lincoln. Lincoln had a communist general in his army, August Willich. Karl Marx wrote a personal letter to Abraham Lincoln, calling him the single-minded son of the working class, rescuing in a chain race. This is a fact. And Unholy Rome, who's just this, RBN guy, he gets out there and says anybody who says Marx and Lincoln had anything to do with each other is retarded. And so I just get in his chat and I just show, no, there are some, you can disagree with that with Lincoln, but I'm just telling you, Marx did like Lincoln, and that is historically documented. And so rather than saying, and I'm just posting the links, you can read Marx's own words. This is a historical fact. Marx supported Abraham Lincoln. That's indisputable. Not because Abraham Lincoln was a communist, but because there was a war going on, and one side was for slavery and one side was against it, and Marx was clearly on the anti-slavery side. And Unholy Rome starts in, he calls me a Nazi and says, oh, you must be a white supremacist. There's no difference between National Socialism and patriotic socialism. And I'm just like, dude, some things are true and some things are not. And that a whole bunch of his fans, they start posting nasty things about me and all this. And it's like, I could be the most evil person in the world. I could be literally Hitler. But if I said that Marx supported Lincoln, that would be true. But none of these people seem to care what the truth is. They're fans of Unholy Rome, and he must be right, and I'm the bad guy. So it really doesn't matter what's actually true. And I'm sitting here saying this is blatantly true, and they don't care because it's not about what's true. They're not interested in whether Marx supported Lincoln. They're not interested in learning any of this. They're just interested in being fans of Unholy Rome. And then at some point, Unholy Rome will offend them, right? He will do something wrong, and then they'll become anti-fans of Unholy Rome, and they'll hate him, and they'll want to tear him down. And it's like, neither of these are healthy, right? And I've seen this so many times. And it is not real politics. at all. And so if you want to talk about red team versus blue team, I mean, it's they say that politics, that's the ad hominem fallacy, I've heard, right? Where you make it about the person, not the issue. This is like the ad hominem fallacy taken to a whole nother level, where it's all about the people involved. And do you like them or do you not like them? And that is the issue. Do you like the person involved or not? And it doesn't matter what's true, and it doesn't matter what's effective. It's just a matter. And then it's about, you have to prove, you want to gain cred for yourself. It's not even just about you consuming them because you like them, you find them entertaining or whatever. It's about, you want the cred. Your identity is being their fan. So you want to outdo other people. You want to expose other people for not being real fans. I mean, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Penny says, Mexican former public security chief gets 38 years for narco trafficking. Former President Calderon claims he knew nothing and still opposes judicial reform. Scheinbaum calls out hypocrisy. Now, that's interesting. The drug cartels have been a big problem in Mexico for a really long time. And AMLO originally, his platform was that he was for legalizing drugs and that he was going to soften it on the drug cartels. But it seems like now he's going after people from previous administrations, or I guess the new president, the successor to AMLO, Scheinbaum, is going after the corruption of previous administrations. And that is very interesting to me. That's very, very interesting to me because of the fact that, the drug cartels have been heavily embedded in the Mexican state for a long time. The U.S. government has given so many weapons to the Mexican police that go right into the hands of the drug cartels. The USA gives military-grade weapons to the Mexican police, and immediately the drug cartels get them. And I've done stories about this. This is like ongoing. And so this is Bonapartism, right? This guy who is they're locking up. He's not just some working dude. He's a former public security chief. That's called Bonapartism. That's when the ruling class starts suppressing other members of the ruling class. And so pay close attention to it. Mexico had a Bonapartist government during the 1930s, right? That supported the Spanish Republic. It was kind of a progressive government that was sympathetic to the Soviet Union and such. So it's interesting. The British Empire became the UN, and the Roman Empire became the Catholic Church. Not sure I agree with either of those things. The Roman Empire becoming the Catholic Church, though, I can see that one, right? So it's very interesting. The way the Roman Empire was able to take over is because of the oracle at Delphi, and that's very interesting. But, there's an island in Greece that was the center of the Mediterranean Ocean. It was considered the center of the known world back then, and it's called Delphi. And there's a temple on Delphi. And there was a priesthood of guys who guarded that temple. And there were women that supposedly, had, connections to the gods or something, could give prophecies. And the temple at Delphi was like the center of the Mediterranean. And all the kings and all that would go there to get prophecies given to them. And the temple at Delphi nudged the modern or the known world into the hands of the Romans gradually. And they were still, when the temple at Delphi came into existence, they were given prophecies, and Greece was at its height, and then Greece started to decline, and they were still doing their thing up until the time of the fall of the Roman Republic. Julius Caesar and all of them were going to the temple at Delphi. And so the temple at Delphi, this little island, it was like a precursor to the UN. And it was similar to the Vatican. It was a space that was not belonging to any government, but claimed divine authority, right? Claimed to have direct connection to God, and kind of played the mediator or the middleman between the various kings and could nudge its own agenda. So the Vatican and the temple at Delphi are very similar. And the Roman Empire, right, it became Christianized and then it deteriorated. But the Vatican started to play a similar role in Europe then after the decline of the Roman Empire. Now, to say the Roman Empire became the Catholic Church is not correct because, the Roman Empire, they had Pax Romana. I mean, there was peace. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, right, you had the Byzantine Empire, and then ultimately the Roman Empire, you had Charlemagne, and it was chaos. All those countries were fighting each other, right? The Vatican was trying to negotiate the peace to some degree or other, but there was a lot of instability. The Dark Ages were full of instability, where the different principalities and kingdoms were fighting against each other. You didn't even really have modern nation states. You just had, it was a lot of different local principalities and kingdoms fighting each other. And the Vatican was like the one, in Christendom, they were like the one referee, so to speak, but they would step in, try to negotiate and resolve these things. But Pax Romana, the Romans, there was total peace because the Romans had their iron fist all over the total world. And when the Vatican came into ascendancy as there wasn't total peace. They were just kind of the referee in the middle of it. It was more like the Temple at Delphi. But then as far as the British Empire becoming the UN, it's very clear that the Round Table group, the more liberal wing of the ruling class, was more for the UN. The Soviet Union had a lot to do with the United Nations, and the influence of the Soviet Union is all over the United Nations. You go there, there's so much communist artwork, and there's so much. The UN was an attempt to kind of stabilize the world, so you didn't have all-out wars everywhere, and that was, it was kind of that soft power managerial wing of the ruling class. The Rockefellers donated the land for it, and the British, I'm sure that what we call the Eastern establishment was all in favor of creating it. But to say that the British Empire just became the UN, that's not exactly right. Right? The UN, for example, they take votes condemning Israel all the time. It just doesn't have the power to actually do anything, right? The UN has very little power when it really gets down to it. There's a lot of money that gets handed out in aid programs, and there's a lot of speeches that get made, and there's a lot of research that gets done. But in terms of actually implementing policy, very rarely does the UN Security Council get to the point where it agrees that they can actually do something. So there you go. Do you feel desegregation, which destroyed and impoverished thriving black businesses, banks, and neighborhoods so whites could profit, had malicious motives? Well, on a previous stream, I talked about how, like, school desegregation, busing, was done to break apart ethnic neighborhoods, those urban, Catholic communities that were like a barrier to austerity. But basic desegregation, right? The right to vote, the right to, the right to attend school at all. I mean, the basic desegregation was just a struggle for human rights. I mean, just basic human rights. Black people did not have rights prior to the Civil Rights Act, prior to the Voting Rights Act. Black people, were, even though maybe on paper they were considered human beings, they had no human rights whatsoever. So, to dismiss the entire struggle against legal segregation in the South, I mean, that would be wrong, right? And communists were the first people to fight for desegregation, right? I mean, they were fighting for the rights of black people against Jim Crow segregation, etc., before anybody, right? So that said, right, and black nationalists will point this out. The ruling class has always been much more afraid of any kind of black financial headquarters than they are of desegregation, right? Tulsa, Oklahoma was Black Wall Street, and you saw the ruling class smashed it. And there have been various attempts to form some kind of like black economic headquarters, black economy that the ruling class smashed for for imperialist reasons, right? Because black people are an oppressed nation within the United States. And just like they don't want Iraq to be a competitor on the world market selling oil, they don't want black businesses to be competitors with American monopolies. And so throughout black history, since the time slavery ended up to now, there will be various attempts to set up some kind of black Wall Street or, group of black businesses in an area, and they always smash that. There are wealthy black people, black millionaires, black billionaires like P. Diddy. He's not the only one, but the idea of having like black economic power is something the ruling class has always tried to suppress. And Marxists are often a little bit dismissive of that. They will just start saying, oh, that's, black nationalism. That's well, no, but that's true. I mean, black people are a nation, and they are subject to super exploitation under imperialism, and that a lot of black radicalism has been done on the basis of fighting for some kind of black capitalism, fighting for some kind of black economic independence that's not necessarily socialist. And we would support that, just like we support any country struggling against imperialism on any basis. So, yeah. They say the biggest threat to democracy is democracy. What does democracy mean, right? Democracy is a word, it just means the rule of the people. In ancient Greece, the word democracy had a negative connotation, right? That in ancient Greece, they said it was like a cycle. You had a good king, and that was the monarch. You had an absolute leader, and the good one was a monarch. But after a while, monarchy deteriorated into tyranny. You got a corrupt, leader. He was a tyrant. And then, as a result of tyranny, you would get the tyrant would be overthrown, and then you would get oligarchy, which was the good of a corrupt rule of an elite. But it was a good elite. It was the best, the oligarchs. So oligarchy was the best. But then oligarchy would deteriorate into plutocracy. And plutocracy was the rule of an elite, but that was a corrupt, self-serving, fat and rich elite, plutocracy. And so after a while, the people would get tired of plutocracy, and they would overthrow the plutocracy, and they would replace it with a republic. And a republic was an elected government, and it was a good, responsible elected government. But after a while, the republic would deteriorate into democracy, and democracy was vulgar mob rule. The rule of the mob, people's freedom being taken away, mob chaos and vengeance and not protecting the rights of individuals. And so out of the chaos of democracy, you would then get monarchy. And then monarchy would become tyranny, and so on. That's how the ancient Greeks considered, their civilizations to operate. Democracy was considered a vulgar thing, but the literal meaning of the word democracy is just the rule of the people. What does that mean? All right, there's certain things that we equate with democracy that don't necessarily mean democracy. For example, free speech. Right? You say that in order to have democracy, you have to have free speech, right? If the people are going to vote, they need to be able to hear different opinions and all that. Well, what if the people don't want free speech? I could very well imagine a society where people are like, you know what? I don't want freedom. I don't think people should be able to say certain things. And if the majority of the people want that, that's democracy. Well, we say, democracy means protecting the rights of the individual. No, it doesn't. Democracy just means the rule of the people. You could have an absolute monarchy that was a democracy because the people wanted that, right? I mean, it's like democracy is a vague concept. The republic is an elected government. Democracy is just the rule of the people. And I would argue that in some ways, the very authoritarian anti-imperialist states are more democratic than the United States is. And I've said this before, and it makes people really mad, but it's true. In Iran, the Iranian government would not be in power for one moment if it wasn't for the Basij councils they have in every neighborhood and every community that enforce the will of the revolution. North Korea would not be in power for one moment if it wasn't for those military committees and those, well-organized people who back them up. Whereas our leaders, public opinion shows we're really mad, we're really angry, but it doesn't matter. They're still in power, right? We're completely locked out of decision-making, and the government in the United States doesn't rely on our support at all. China is another great example. The Chinese Communist Party the Chinese government wouldn't be in power for a moment, for a minute, if it wasn't for the 90 million members of the Chinese Communist Party organized in every block and every neighborhood. So is China and Iran and North Korea, are these countries more authoritarian than the United States is? Absolutely. Do you have the same level of free speech? No, you do not. But are they more democratic? Yes, because the people are more heavily involved in the governing process. And the government is reliant on a well-organized population to carry out its agenda. Our government is not reliant on us to carry out our agenda. And most of us are not involved in the governing process at all whatsoever. We just kind of sit back and, we might vote, every 4 years. We might complain on Facebook, but we're not really involved in the governing process. and the government doesn't need us to be involved in the governing process. Well, in all the anti-imperialist countries, they rely on the people being involved in the governing process, and the people are very, very well involved in it. So in that sense, even though they don't have the same level of freedom, it's more democratic because there's more rule of the people, right? And that's where it gets all tricky, right? It's one thing I hear people often say, well, I believe in democracy, not communism. It's like communist countries they always call themselves democratic, right? It was the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. It was the Democratic German Republic, the German Democratic Republic. I mean, it's like communist countries generally consider themselves to be democratic. It's a workers' democracy. It's proletarian democracy. It's a democracy guided by the Marxist-Leninist ideology, right? They're opposed to capitalism and imperialism, not opposed to democracy. So there we go. The Roman Empire had red versus blue chariot races. Yes, that is true. And the bread in circuses is a way to control the population. And, the idea that, we're all just kind of entertained while the elites rule over us and we're being stupefied. Bread in circuses is an expression they use for the way things are dumbed down and the people are locked out of politics. So you think the USA should ban trap music because it speaks about gangs, just like they did in Mexico? You mean rap music. I assume that's a typo, Gabby. I apologize. I didn't mean to embarrass you there. But you said trap music. I think you mean rap music. It's probably autocorrect on your phone. No, I don't think we should ban any form of music. I don't know. I'm for free type of music. But it would be better. I have always felt in all different periods throughout history, artists have always had a social responsibility to make the people who consume their art better, right? Someone composes a piece of poetry. The idea is the people who read that poetry get smarter, get better because they listen to it. Oh no, trap music is real. Oh wow. I've never even heard of trap music. And if you write a play or a TV program, the idea is that people will become better if they consume it. If you write a book, people will be smarter because they read it. And the same applies to music. If you compose a piece of music, the idea is that people will become better because they listen to it. Unfortunately, now in the age of mass marketing of art and culture, that is not the case. There's a feeling that we just want to make money. And because we just want to make money, it doesn't matter if the audience is better. We just give people what will sell. And so the social responsibility of the artist has vanished. Now I have to find out what trap music is, because I assumed it was rap music. What is trap music? Trap music is a subgenre of hip-hop pioneered by Atlanta rappers T.I., Jeezy, Gucci Mane, and originated in the southern United States. Trap music is known for its simple, rhythmic, minimalistic productions that utilize synthesized drums, and is characterized by hi-hat patterns, snare drums, bass drums, and long decay. I have never heard of trap music. And trap music themes generally revolve around controlled substances being sold. The term trap refers to a place where drug deals go down. Other topics include street life, acquiring wealth, violence, American vehicles, and life experiences that artists have faced in Southern American surroundings. Trap music employs multi-layered, thin or thick textured monographic tones. Well, look, I always warn people to be very careful about this, because I know a song. There's a song that I know that is about it is about a guy who robs a cop at gunpoint and then goes home and celebrates and gets drunk. And then while he's sleeping, his girlfriend takes his gun and fills his gun up with water and then calls the cop he robbed, and the cop he robbed comes into his house, and he pulls out the gun to shoot the cop he robbed, and he can't shoot him because it's full of water, so he goes to jail, and then the guy is sitting there in jail, realizing that his only hope is for his brother to break him out of jail. Now, think about that. I mean, you can't get more gangster than that. I mean, it's about getting drunk. It's about robbing people at gunpoint. It's about your girlfriend betraying you and filling your gun up with water. That's about as gangster as you can get. But that song is a beloved Irish song called Whiskey in the Jar. And, you know, I mean, it was about written at a time then the Irish people were very impoverished. Criminality was very common among Irish people. There was a lot of hatred for the police. There was a lot of love for alcohol. And, you know, Whiskey in the Jar is a great song. And just kind of reflected the culture at the time in Ireland at that time. You know, there was a lot of robbery. There was a lot of hatred for police. There was a lot of alcohol, and I don't think that song should be outlawed. And yeah, obviously it's about criminality. It's about, you know, being betrayed by your girlfriend. It's about, you know, violence against law enforcement. I don't think that song should be outlawed just because the theme that it is presenting is, you know, is vulgar. That's just kind of how people felt at the time. And if you listen to it, there's a lot of old songs that are like that, right? And country music too, right? There's a lot of country music songs that are about violence against law enforcement, robbing people, drinking lots of alcohol, using drugs, you know, and I don't think that rap music is especially evil because of that. You know, I think that that's just part of working class life. Crime exists. Resentment against law enforcement exists. Drug use exists. These things exist. And in impoverished communities and communities that are struggling, when people are more impoverished, these things become exacerbated. You have more drug addiction. You have more resentment against the police. You have more criminality. These things kind of happen. So, you know, I don't think we should single out black rap music. Now, I don't know about this trap stuff. I don't know what's special about it. It's like a special kind of rap that is particularly, I don't know enough about it. I'm just reading the Wikipedia page, but I'm not comfortable with that because I don't want anyone to outlaw Whiskey in the Jar. I think Whiskey in the Jar is a good song. It's a darn good song. And, you know, it reflects how a lot of Irish people felt in the 1800s. So there you go. There's one more super chat and I'm going to put it on. I will answer it. But before that, I am going to make you all listen to Whiskey in the Jar, right? Because if there's any song that should be outlawed, you know, for having gangster themes, it's Whiskey in the Jar. So I'm going to put on Whiskey in the Jar and not the Thin Lizzy version. My goodness. I'm going to put on the original version of it. You know, because there's a lot of people who've done the Thin Lizzy version of it, but that's not what we need. I'm going to put on a version of it that I can get away with playing on here. So, just going to put Whiskey in the Jar traditional because I really don't want to put on the Thin Lizzy version. I really want to put on the actual version of the song. Okay, this is Raymond Crook performing it, and I generally can play his stuff on these streams. So I'll put on Raymond Crook. If anyone has any more super chats, by all means, send them in. You know, and we'll keep going here. I'm a little tired, but hey, you know, all is good. All is well. Had a productive day. I hope we can continue to work for peace on the Korean Peninsula. I'll have more about that soon. And we're going to hit the streets with the banner once again. But yes, this is Raymond Crook, Whiskey in the Jar. And so I have another super chat from a guy named Lionel. And then after that, but if anyone has any more, I'm all here to answer your super chats. Oh, see, somebody else sent it in. So anyway, so, all right. This is Raymond Crook. I've never heard his version of Whiskey in the Jar. Here we go.
As I was going over the far Kerry mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was counting. I first produced me pistol and then produced me rapier. Said stand and deliver, for I am a bold deceiver, mushering da-ma-doo-da-ma-da. Whack for the daddy-o, whack for the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. I counted out his money and I made a pretty penny. I put it in my pocket and I took it home to Jenny. She sighed and she swore that she never would deceive me. But the devil take the women, for they never can be easy. Mushering, da-ba-doo-da-ba-da. Whack for the daddy-o, whack for the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. I went into me chamber, all for to take a slumber. I dreamed of golden jewels, and for sure it was no wonder. But Jenny took me charges, and she filled them up with water. Then she sent for Captain Farrell to be ready for the slaughter. Mushering, da-ba-doo-da-ba-da. Whack for the daddy-o, whack for the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. It was early in the morning, I rose up for travel. The guards were all around me, and likewise Captain Farrell. I first produced me pistol, but she stole away me rapier. But I couldn't shoot the water, so a prisoner I was taken. Mushering, da-ba-doo-da-ba-da. Whack for the daddy-o, whack for the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. If anyone can aid me, it's me brother in the army. If I can find his station down in Cork or in Killarney, and if he'll come and join me, we'll go roving near Kilkenny. And I swear he'll treat me better than me darling sporting Jenny. Mushering, da-ba-doo-da-ba-da. Whack for the daddy-o, whack for the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. Now some men take delight in the drinking and the roving, but others take delight in the gambling and the smoking. But I take delight in the juice of the barley, and courting pretty fair maids in the morning bright and early. Mushering, da-ba-doo-da-ba-da. Whack for the daddy-o, whack for the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar.
So there we go. All right, whiskey in the jar. As described in your books and in these streams, which I agree with, Obama regretted his intervention in Libya and wasn't a fan of warhawk Clinton. So why is he campaigning so strongly for Kamala? Because he's from the same wing of the ruling class. It is the Eastern establishment that is behind him. He is with that Eastern establishment. He just represented a wing of it that wasn't as nuts. But he was very opposed to Trump. And there are rumors that he also saw Kamala as particularly dangerous. But Obama didn't go over to the Trump camp. He campaigned for Hillary Clinton also, right? There are layers to this. But Obama is a complete creation. I recommend reading Wayne Madsen's book, The Manufacturing of a President. It's very good. And it talks about, there's so much with Obama from the beginning. I mean, his father was a military leader in Indonesia after the coup of 1965, when they slaughtered all kinds of people. It started out, they just were killing communists, and they just started slaughtering ethnically Chinese people in Indonesia. And, Obama's mother, Ann Dunham, was basically a CIA agent. She was a Ford Foundation employee who was doing research in Indonesia at the time of the coup. His parents, they ran the Bank of Hawaii. That was one of the main ways the CIA would send money across the Pacific region and would bankroll. It was a small bank, but it was like a CIA money laundering bank, basically. Obama has been, he was part of the CIA deep state from the beginning. He was very manufactured. And the role that he played in Chicago politics prior to getting elected to the Senate was not a good one. He was very much with the foundations, kind of managing activism in Chicago. And, Barack Obama has never been an independent force, but he at least to some degree saw that the Hillary Clinton faction was nuts to some degree, and he regretted what they pushed him to do. But I'm sure he thinks Trump is much more dangerous. And he made that clear. He said, when Trump, he said he didn't believe the American people would vote for Trump. He said, being president is not a reality TV show. And, there you go. Gunfighter Ballad introduced violence to music. What's Gunfighter Ballad? Is that a particular song, or, because I don't know. Some of those old, on these streams, Gunfighter Ballad and Trail songs. Okay. I'll have to look that up. But, some of those old medieval ballads are very violent. violent, right? On previous streams, I've read The Death of Young Andrew, which you want to look at that. That's a really, really old English ballad that is really violent. And I have read it on these streams because when I was a kid, I went with my parents to like a folk music concert in upstate New York. We drove from Ohio to upstate New York. And I remember there was a harpist and he performed The Death of Young Andrew. And I remember sitting there and, it stuck with me. And then in my adulthood, I remembered this. And so I went and looked up the lyrics to The Death of Young Andrew. The Death of Young Andrew is a very, very, very violent song about rape and violence and vengeance and, and I mean, that song goes back to like the 1400s or something. So, there is a lot of violent music out there, right? I mean, violence is an unfortunate aspect of life, right? We live in a society where people have aggression against each other and, social hierarchies exist. And as long as social hierarchies exist, they have to be enforced. And one of the main ways that social hierarchies are enforced is with violence. Yeah, the Bible is very violent. There's all kinds of brutal, graphic violence all throughout the Bible. Go read the Old Testament. It's full of awful violence. I mean, it's just as long as social hierarchies exist, there is going to have to be a way those social hierarchies are enforced, right? Because people generally want more than they already have. They don't want to conform. And that's what we would like to do. We'd like to create a world full of abundance so that social hierarchies are no longer necessary because there's enough to go around for everyone. And so we don't need to enforce these hierarchies with violence. Sigmund Freud talks about, there being an aggressive instinct. I think that's true. But people can be aggressive in sports. People can be aggressive in a sexual context, right? Sex can often be a very aggressive thing in a consensual way. I mean, there are ways, there are outlets for the instinct of aggression that don't involve straight up violence. Okay. Combat sports, right? Boxing, wrestling, those are violent sports and they could be an outlet for the human aggressive instinct, but they don't involve actual violence. There's many examples. So I think that yes, Freud is probably right that there is a natural instinct toward aggression, but the way that human aggression is channeled is to use it to enforce social hierarchies or to repel social hierarchies, right? And that, as the mode of production changes, we're constantly renegotiating what kind of social hierarchies we have. Feudalism, slavery, capitalism, but social hierarchies are generally enforced with violence. And human aggression is channeled toward enforcing those hierarchies with violence. And I believe that as we get toward a higher state of abundance, we will get beyond social hierarchies. And so violence to maintain them or to push back against them will be less and less necessary. And I mean, we shall see. But there you go. All right, folks. Well, it's almost midnight. And so I'm going to say good night for now. But I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for asking so many good questions. As always, you guys are great. Hopefully I have more energy. I was a little bit tired tonight, but I figured it was better. It's always better to stream than not stream. That is the rule I go by. It's always better to show up for events than not show up for events. That's what I feel. It's always better to attend than not attend. And it's also always better to stream than not stream. So I'm glad I streamed tonight. I think we talked about some important stuff. I wasn't, I was feeling a little tired, but I felt, hey, I got something to say. So yeah, glad I could spend this evening with you. I hope you all are doing well. And we will check in again soon.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.